Hey everyone! Welcome back to Fanfic Universe. Get ready for an amazing tale. What if Naruto was born as a primordial werewolf and his first transformation destroyed the hidden leaf? Smash that like button and subscribe for more. Here we go. Chapter 1, The Night the Moon Bled. The worst part about being hated was how ordinary it became. Naruto had learned that early, somewhere between the third time a shopkeeper slid his change across the counter without touching his hand and the first time he'd asked a kid at the academy why nobody would sit next to him and the kid had just gotten up and moved seats without answering. There was no dramatic moment where it clicked. It just settled into him the way cold settled into old apartments with bad windows, slow and thorough and everywhere at once. He was 7 years old and he walked home from the academy alone every single day. Today was no different. The late afternoon sun hammered the rooftops of Konoha orange and gold, the kind of pretty that made the village look like it belonged on a postcard, and Naruto walked down the main market road with his hands in his pockets and his eyes forward, counting the exact number of steps it took to get from the academy gate to his apartment building. 412. He knew because he'd counted so many times that the number lived in his feet now, automatic, like breathing. He passed the fishmonger's stall and felt the man's eyes track him the way eyes track something dangerous. Past the flower stand where two women leaned close and spoke in the particular kind of hush that was designed to reach the ears it was talking about. Past the ramen stand, Ichiraku's, which was the one place in the village that didn't make his stomach clench, but old man Tucci had closed early today for some festival prep and the orange curtains were drawn. 412 steps. He took them in 20 fewer than usual because his right eye was swollen half shut from where one of the older kids had caught him with a rock after class, and the throb of it was making him walk faster than he meant to. It hadn't been a fight. A fight implied Naruto had hit back. He'd learned not to, not because he was afraid, he'd stopped being afraid of those particular kids around the same time he stopped being afraid of the dark, which was to say they weren't the worst things in his world and therefore didn't rate. But because fighting back made the Anbu come, and the Anbu coming made the Hokage hear about it. And when the Hokage heard about it he would call Naruto into his office and look at him with those tired, sad eyes and speak in that careful, measured tone. And something about that gentleness from the one person in the village who wasn't afraid of him made Naruto feel worse than the rock had. So he'd put his arms over his head and waited for them to get bored. They usually got bored faster than you'd think. There was only so much satisfaction in hitting something that wouldn't react. His apartment was on the 4th floor of a building at the edge of the residential district, wedged between a storage facility and a wall of the outer training grounds. It was small enough that Naruto had once measured it in footsteps out of curiosity and then not written down the number because he hadn't wanted to know it. The window faced north. You couldn't see the monument from it, which Naruto had decided was fine. He'd stopped looking at the monument anyway. He climbed the stairs, let himself in, dropped his bag by the door. The apartment was exactly as he'd left it, which was to say, not quite clean and not quite a mess, the middle ground of a kid who had nobody to tidy up for and not enough energy to be slovenly on purpose. There was a bowl in the sink from breakfast. A jacket on the back of the one chair. A calendar on the wall with today's date circled in red. He'd circled it himself 3 weeks ago when he'd realized what today was. His birthday. He stood in front of the calendar for a moment, looking at that red circle, and then he went to the kitchen, checked the cabinet, and confirmed that he still had most of a bag of instant ramen. He put water on to boil and sat on the floor with his back against the cabinet because the chair was across the room and the floor was fine. 7 years old. He didn't know what he'd expected. It wasn't like the previous 6 had come with fanfare. But somewhere in the back of his head, the part that still occasionally constructed elaborate fantasies about what things could be like, he'd thought that maybe this one, the first one where he could actually mark the day himself, where he was old enough to make his own choices about what to do, might feel different. It felt exactly the same. The water boiled. He made the ramen and ate it standing over the sink because it was too hot to sit down with and he was hungry enough not to wait. Outside the window, the sky was shifting from orange to purple, and the particular quality of the light made the rooftops look almost soft, which was a word Naruto had never once associated with Konoha but kept almost thinking anyway. He was rinsing the bowl when the headache started. It was not a new sensation. He got headaches sometimes, had since he could remember, usually the kind that sat behind his eyes and drummed. But this one started at the base of his skull instead, a deep pressure that was less like pain and more like something pushing against the inside of his bones, looking for a way out. He gripped the edge of the sink and breathed through it. Outside, the light had gone fully purple now, the last stripe of orange swallowed by the horizon, and the moon was coming up. He could see a sliver of it through the north window. Almost full. He'd noticed it last night too, that swollen, heavy look it had, the way it sat in the sky like something waiting. The pressure in his skull got worse. Naruto put the bowl down, very carefully, because his hands weren't quite steady, and walked to the window and looked out. The moon was full. He hadn't realized. He'd known it was close but he hadn't, the calendar, he thought suddenly. He'd circled his birthday in red but he hadn't written anything else. Hadn't noted the lunar cycle because why would he, who did that, who had any reason to track the moon except, the thought dissolved. Everything dissolved. The pain hit him like the village had hit the ground the night the Ninetales came, sudden, total, and without mercy. He doubled over, grabbed the windowsill, felt his fingernails crack against the wood and then felt something impossibly worse than that, which was that they weren't fingernails anymore. They were something longer. Something black and curved and deeply, fundamentally wrong in the way that things which are right for a wolf are wrong for a 7-year-old boy in a cramped apartment in a ninja village. He opened his mouth to yell and what came out wasn't a yell. It was deeper. It came from somewhere below language, below thought, from a place in his chest that had always been there and humming at a frequency too low for daylight but had now, under the full moon with the primordial blood singing through every vein, cracked open like a fault line. What? Said a voice that was not his voice. Not Naruto's. Deeper. Older. The voice in the cage, the one he'd heard once in a dream, massive and contemptuous and old as stone, except this was different from that, further down, further back, predating even the thing in the cage by something that couldn't be measured in years. It said, simply, awaken. The apartment wall took most of the first shockwave. The north wall, the one with the window, blew out. Not from a physical impact, not from chakra in any form the village's sensors were calibrated to detect, but from something that moved through the world the way sound moved through water, not on the surface but through the whole body of it, a vibration so fundamental that stone and wood and glass had no vocabulary for resistance. Naruto fell out through the space where the wall had been. He did not fall down. He landed, 4 floors down, in the training ground dirt, and the landing was not the landing of a 7-year-old boy falling from a height that should have shattered his legs. It was the landing of something that had never needed to think about impact because impact had always understood to get out of the way. He crouched in the dirt and breathed, huge, ragged, animal breaths that dragged the night air in and tasted it, and the night air had information in it now, enormous amounts, the entire village laid out in scent and heat and the soft seismic pulse of 2,500 heartbeats, and every single one of those heartbeats tasted like prey. No, Naruto thought. Or tried to. The word was there but slippery, the human parts of his brain surfing on something that did not care about words. He looked down at his hands. They were not hands. He had seen transformation jutsu, every academy student had. He knew what it looked like when a person's body shifted to something else, the shimmer and the deliberate mechanics of it. This was not that. This was what transformation jutsu was, a pale, stuttering imitation of. His hands were massive, dark-furred, ending in claws that had already left 3-inch gouges in the training ground dirt without him noticing. His arms, he was bigger. Significantly bigger. The clothes had not survived the process and he was dimly aware of that, the tattered remnants of his orange jacket in the dirt around him, but the more pressing fact was that he was easily 5 feet tall now in a crouch that had him low to the ground, and when he stood, when the thing that lived in his blood stood, using his body like an instrument it had always owned and was simply now playing in full, he was taller than that. The moonlight fell on him and he felt it like warmth. Like recognition. Something in the ancient blood sang back to the moon the way a dog hears a pitch no human ear catches, except this wasn't a dog responding to a whistle, this was something that had made the concept of dogs possible, deciding to remind the world it existed. His eyes, if you could have seen them, if any of the ANBU who had felt the chakra spike and were already moving had been close enough yet, were no longer blue. They were silver. Bright, reflective silver, the exact color of the moon on still water, and they were not entirely the eyes of something that had ever needed to be afraid of anything the world had produced since the Sage of Six Paths drew his last breath. Naruto stood in the training ground and the village of Konoha spread out before him, lit and breathing and alive, and the primordial wolf blood was very old and very hungry and had been asleep for a very, very long time. The howl that came out of him moved through the village like a blade. Windows cracked. Dogs, every dog in Konoha, simultaneously, went silent. The ANBU moving toward the training ground stopped moving, not because they decided to but because something in the primate brain, something much older than ninja training or loyalty or mission parameters, said stop moving, said be very still, said the thing that is making that sound is not something you run toward. In the Hokage Tower, Hiruzen Sarutobi dropped his pipe. In the Hyuga compound, 3-year-old Hinata woke from a dead sleep and sat up in bed with wide pale eyes and said nothing, just listened. In the deepest part of a seal she didn't know she carried, something ancient and red opened one enormous eye. Naruto moved. Not ran. Moved, the word ran implied a speed that had a ceiling, implied a thing you could clock and compare. He moved through the training ground and hit the outer wall of the residential district and went through it the way water goes through a crumbling dam, not destroying it with force but simply being incompatible with the idea of it being solid. The wall came apart. He was in the market district. And the primordial blood was fully awake now, centuries of dreaming behind it, and it had one very simple, very old relationship with territory, it claimed it. The market stalls went first. Not because Naruto wanted to destroy them, want was barely in the equation anymore, but because the force of his passage through the street was such that the structures around him registered the fact of his existence and came to the logical conclusion that they should not be standing quite so close. Awnings shredded. Stall fronts collapsed inward. The fruit stand that had shorted him changed 2 years running became a scatter of bruised plums and splintered wood across 30 feet of cobblestone. He moved through the market and his senses were absolutely overwhelming and somehow completely clear, because the primordial blood had a relationship with overwhelming sensory input that 7-year-old Naruto had never had, which was to say it had no problem at all organizing 10,000 pieces of information at once. The village was there, total and vivid, every sleeping person, every panicking person, every ninja scrambling to respond, every child crying, every animal fleeing, all of it present and mapped and assessed in terms of a very old, very specific question, which was, is it a threat or is it not? Most of it was not. The ANBU who arrived first were 4 of them, dropping from rooftops, weapons drawn, moving with the crisp coordinated efficiency of people who had trained for 100 scenarios. This was not one of the 100 scenarios. You could tell by the way the one in front, cat mask, 2 swords, the best of them by a margin, landed and then went absolutely motionless for a full second before muscle memory took over and he settled into a fighting stance. Naruto turned toward them and tilted his head. The gesture was profoundly animal, that slow, precise tilt of a predator examining something it doesn't quite understand yet but is interested in, and it came with the full weight of silver eyes and the particular stillness of something that wasn't afraid of them and wasn't performing confidence, it simply had no frame of reference for the emotional state of being afraid of 4A and BU. Cat Mask moved first. Swords drawn, a burst of speed that was genuinely impressive by human standards, closing the 15 feet between them in under a second. Naruto caught the blade. Not deflected it. Caught it. His hand closed around the sword the way you'd catch a stick someone tossed you, casual and complete, and the steel, good steel, chakra forged, the kind that could cut a boulder, put a hairline scratch in the black fur across his palm and stopped. He looked at the blade. Looked at the man holding it. Then he set the man down. Not through. Set. picked him up by the sword arm and set him on the ground 10 feet behind where he'd been standing, with no more apparent effort than moving a piece of furniture. The man landed, scrambled, stared up from behind his mask at something his brain genuinely could not finish processing. The other three hesitated. That hesitation lasted long enough for Naruto to turn away from them entirely and keep moving, which was the most unsettling thing any of them had ever experienced in their professional lives, not the strength, not the speed, not the eyes, but the fact that they had simply been assessed and deprioritized. He moved deeper into the village. The Hokage monument was to the north. He could feel it more than see it, that mass of stone carved with faces, and something in the primordial blood had a feeling about carved stone and declarations of human authority that was not quite contempt and not quite amusement but lived in the neighborhood of both. He moved toward it not because he meant to but because the blood was riding the route, and the route went through the center of things, through the village's heart, through the place where the most heartbeats clustered and the most chakra pulsed and the territorial claim would be most clearly felt. The administrative district. Buildings older and sturdier than the market stalls, built when the village was young and the architects had believed in permanence. They held up better. For a while. The civilian evacuation was already in progress, someone had hit the emergency protocols, the bells were ringing the pattern that meant move underground, move now, don't stop for anything, and the streets were emptying, the last stragglers sprinting down side alleys while the ANBU units multiplied, because they'd been calling for backup since the first howl, and backup had been coming from every direction. A squad of 8 landed in a ring around him in the administrative plaza, the fountain in the center of the square catching moonlight, and this was a different kind of response, not 4 individuals but a coordinated unit, sealmakers and close-range fighters and a genjutsu specialist at the back, and the squad leader called out something sharp and technical that Naruto's human mind distantly recognized as a binding formation. The seals hit him. 6 of them, simultaneous, perfect form, the kind of binding that had been specifically designed for containment of high-level bijou threats. They were very well made. The chakra in them was dense and expertly woven. They held for approximately 4 seconds. Then the primordial blood noticed them. The seals weren't chakra-based in the way the binding was designed to contain. The wolf's power wasn't chakra. It predated the chakra system, sat beneath it in a register the seals had no anchor in, and when it simply breathed against the bindings they dissolved the way chalk dissolved in rain, not broken, not overwhelmed, just rendered irrelevant by contact with something that operated on a different layer of reality entirely. The genjutsu specialist tried next. Naruto blinked. Not broke it. Blinked. The way you blink when a flashlight shines in your face, reflexive and automatic, and the genjutsu was gone, and the specialist was making a sound behind their mask that Naruto's excellent new hearing identified as the sound of someone deciding to retire early. He stood in the plaza and the water in the fountain was moving in rings that radiated outward from his presence, and the moonlight was absolutely perfect, and the primordial blood was doing what it had always done and would always do when it stood in a place where things had been built and claimed and organized. It was saying, "This is mine now." Not in language. Not in anything as sophisticated as language. In the old way, the pre-language way, the way the first pack markers were laid down in a world that didn't have words yet but had territory and had scent and had the understanding, deep and inarguable, that the strongest thing that moves through a place is that place. The howl that came this time was different from the first one. The first had been waking up. This one was a declaration. It started low, lower than sound had any right to be, a frequency that skipped the ears and went straight to the sternum, that made every person within a mile feel it in their ribs before they heard it. Then it climbed, slow and massive, moving up through the registers, and the moonlight seemed to thicken around him as it rose, the silver glow pulling toward him like light toward a drain, and when it finally broke full and open it hit the village like a second wall had gone down. Actual walls went down. The eastern facade of the administrative building cracked from foundation to roofline and toppled inward. The fountain in the plaza shattered. 3 streets away, a storage facility full of explosive tags went up in a secondary explosion that wasn't his fault directly but that the primordial blood seemed to consider aesthetically appropriate. The monument, the great carved faces of the Hokages looking out over their village, took the sound like a physical blow. Fine cracks spread from the first's chin to the third's brow. The fourth's face, Naruto's father's face, which he didn't know was his father's face, split along the jaw. In the Hokage Tower, Hiruzen Sarutobi stood at the window in his robes and looked out at his village and felt something he had not felt since the night of the Nine-Tails attack, which was the specific terror of a man who has done his best and is watching it not be enough. "What is happening?" said one of his aides. Hiruzen didn't answer because he didn't know and because lying to people he respected had never been his habit and because he was looking at the moonlit shape in the plaza below and trying to reconcile the silver eyes and the 4-foot claws and the presence that moved through his village like an old king walking through a room where everyone else had forgotten they were commoners, trying to reconcile all of that with what he knew, which was the seal, and the 9 tails, and the small face of a 7-year-old boy with a swollen eye who had come to his office last week and said, quietly and without self-pity, that the academy teacher kept losing his assignments. "Get everyone out," Hiruzen said. "Hokage-sama, everyone. Now." He went for his robes. His hands were steady. They had always been steady, it was one of the things he was proud of, and he held on to it now the way you held on to a wall in a flood, the steadiness not meaning he wasn't afraid but meaning the fear was going to have to wait its turn. Below, Naruto moved again. He moved through the rest of the administrative district the way a storm moved through a coastline, not targeted, not malicious, but absolute. Things that were in the way ceased to be in the way by becoming rubble. Things that were not in the way shook and cracked but held. The wolf's navigation was not random, it moved along the major roads, through the open spaces, following the pulse of the village's heart the way a river followed the valley's lowest point, and wherever it moved the ground remembered. The ANBU had stopped trying to engage directly. Someone with authority and intelligence had made the call to pull back, to focus on evacuation, to get civilians out of the path and let the thing move rather than try to stop it and lose people doing it. It was the right call. Naruto's human mind, surfacing briefly through the blood tide like something coming up for air, agreed with it without being able to act on the agreement. He couldn't stop. That was the thing, and it was the thing that would stay with him long after the blood tide receded and the moon moved west and he stood in the ash and the quiet with human hands again. He couldn't stop because the primordial blood was not a passenger in his body the way Kurama was, locked in a cage, pushing against bars. It was in his blood, in his cells, in the architecture of his bones. It didn't override him from outside. It was him, the version of him that the moon and the blood and the ancient lineage had always been building toward, and that version did not have an off switch for this. What it had was an end. Territorial claims had a natural completion point. The blood moved through the village in widening rings from the center, marking, asserting, reshaping, and when the last ring closed, when the claim was complete, when every corner of the enclosed space had been touched by his passage or his presence or the resonance of his voice, the urgency dropped out of it the way pressure drops after a valve opens. It was 2 hours after midnight when Naruto stood at the northern edge of the village, at the base of the monument, and the primordial blood settled. He stood very still. The howling had stopped. The secondary explosions had stopped. The bells had stopped. Somewhere in the village, a building was still burning, the orange light of it strobing across the carved stone faces above him, and the smoke was thick enough to be a second sky, and the silence that had fallen over Konoha was the silence of a place trying to remember what it was. Naruto looked at his hands. They were hands again. Smaller than they'd been 20 minutes ago. No claws. No fur. His knuckles were raw. He was in the dirt at the base of the monument wearing nothing because nothing had survived the transformation, and he was 7 years old, and he was cold. He turned around. The village was broken. Not destroyed, not leveled, not burned to nothing, but broken, the way a person was broken versus dead, which was to say it was still there but it would never be quite the same shape again. The administrative district was mostly rubble. Half the market was gone. The outer wall had 4 gaps in it large enough to drive a cart through. Buildings throughout the central district had collapsed or cracked, and the ones still standing wore their damage openly, facade stones gone, roofline sagging, the tidy organized geometry of a functioning village replaced with the random architecture of aftermath. The fires were being fought. He could hear the water jutsu in the distance, the coordinated shouts of ninja trying to stop the damage from spreading. He stood in the dirt at the base of the monument and looked at all of it and felt something move through him that wasn't the primordial blood anymore. Simpler than that. More specifically 7 years old and more devastating for the specificity. He had done this. He had done this and he had not chosen to do it, and he also had not, entirely, not chosen to do it. Some part of him, the part that had counted steps to feel less lost and sat on floors because chairs were too far away and circled his birthday in red because he'd wanted to mark the fact that he existed, some part of that boy had felt, in the first surging moments of the blood waking, something that wasn't terror. He had felt, for exactly one moment, completely and catastrophically himself. He hated that. He held it and hated it and refused to let it go, because if he let it go he'd have nothing but the destruction, nothing but the rubble, nothing but the fires in the distance and the cold and the absolute fact that there was no going back from this. The village had despised him before. It had feared him before, theoretically, as a concept, as a label whispered in alleys. Now it had evidence. Now the fear was architectural. "I know you're there," he said. His voice was rough, stripped raw from the howling, and it came out more even than he'd expected. 3 seconds of silence. Then a figure dropped from the monument's base above him, landing in the dirt 10 feet away, ANBU uniform, a hawk mask, and Naruto's wolf-sharpened senses tasted fear on them and held under it, like a stone under water. "Kid," the ANBU said. "I know what it looks like," Naruto said. Another pause. "Do you?" "I couldn't stop it." He said it simply, not as an excuse, just as a fact. "I need you to know that. Not because it changes anything. Just because it's true." The ANBU was quiet for a long time. Behind the hawk mask, the breathing was elevated but controlled. "Professional. The Hokage wants to see you." Naruto looked at the village. Looked at the fires. Looked at the monument above him, the cracks in the stone, the fourth Hokage's split jaw. He'd done that too, he realized. He'd done all of it. "Okay," he said. He walked toward the ANBU and the ANBU fell into step beside him, not grabbing him, not binding him, just walking, and Naruto was aware of a dozen other presences in the shadows around them, the full escort, the full deployment, as many of Konoha's remaining operational forces as could be assembled at 2 in the morning after a catastrophe, and he was aware of them the way he was now, it seemed, going to be aware of everything, with absolute precision and the ancient, unshakable understanding of a predator who knows that being surrounded means nothing when nothing in the surroundings can touch you. He walked through his broken village in the dark, barefoot in the ash and the debris, 7 years old, and changed past the point of return, and the moon moved west overhead, white and full and utterly indifferent, and the primordial blood in his veins was quiet now, patient, sated, settled the way deep water was settled, surface still, unfathomable depth below. In the cage deep in his mind, Kurama was silent. But one eye was open. And for the first time in the nine-tailed fox's very long memory, the thing looking back at him through the bars of his prison was something that did not need the cage to be impressive. It was just a boy. A boy with silver eyes and the oldest blood in the world, walking through the wreckage he'd made, heading toward the people who'd hurt him every day for 7 years, carrying himself like he'd never heard of the word afraid. Kurama watched him walk. And said nothing. Because for the first time in Kurama's very long and contemptuous life, he wasn't sure what to say. Chapter 2, The Ash and the Living Hiruzen Sarutobi had governed through 2 great wars and 1 apocalyptic night, and he had learned that the most dangerous thing a leader could do in the immediate aftermath of catastrophe was react from the feeling in his chest rather than the thought in his head. He was having a very hard time doing that right now. He stood in what remained of his office. The building had held, mostly, though the east wall had developed a crack wide enough to slot your hand into and the window glass was entirely gone, and he watched Naruto walk through the door with Hawk Mask at his shoulder and approximately 14 ANBU distributed through the shadows of the room, and the first thing Hiruzen felt was relief, which surprised him, because it arrived before the anger and before the grief and before the complicated political calculus that was already assembling itself in the back of his head like a structure he didn't want to build but couldn't stop his mind from making. Relief. The boy was alive. The boy was unhurt. Everything else was a problem for a man who had relief to build from. Naruto stood in the center of the room in a borrowed Anbu cloak someone had thought to bring. It was 5 sizes too large, pooling at his feet, and he'd shoved the sleeves up past his elbows so his hands were visible, and looked at Hiruzen with eyes that were blue again, back to blue, the silver gone with the full weight of the transformation. But there was something different in them. Not the silver. Something that had been there before but quiet, the way embers were quiet when they were mostly ash and then weren't. He didn't apologize. He didn't speak first. He met Hiruzen's eyes and waited, and Hiruzen, who had been a teacher long before he'd been a Hokage, recognized that particular silence, not defiance, not guilt, but the silence of someone who had decided to be honest and was waiting for the room to be ready for it. "Sit down, Naruto," Hiruzen said. "I'm okay standing." Humor an old man. A pause, and then Naruto folded himself into the chair across the desk, the oversized cloak bunching around him, and despite everything, despite the smoke still visible through the empty window frame, despite the death toll he didn't have yet but was already afraid of, Hiruzen was struck by the specific wrongness of a 7-year-old child sitting in a chair in the ruins of a village and looking less shaken than the adults in the room. "Tell me what happened," Hiruzen said. "You already know what happened," Naruto said. "I know what I saw. I want to hear it from you." Naruto looked at the desk. Then at the window. Then back. "I changed," he said. "I couldn't stop it. I didn't know it was going to happen. I don't know if I can stop it happening again." He said each sentence separately, the way you'd stack stones, one at a time, checking the weight of each before you put the next one down. "That's everything I know." Hiruzen folded his hands on the desk. Behind him, the Anbu were very still. "The Nine-Tails seal is intact," he said. It wasn't a question, he'd had it confirmed 3 times in the last hour. "That wasn't the Nine-Tails," Naruto said. Hiruzen looked at him. "I know what the Nine-Tails feels like," Naruto said. "In here." He tapped his stomach, the seal point. "This wasn't from there. This was," he paused, and for the first time looked uncertain, the first crack in the composure, because he was trying to describe something that didn't have words and was 7 years old and did not yet have the vocabulary for ancient blood memory. "It was underneath." "Like," he stopped again. "Started over. You know how when it rains really hard and the river goes over the banks? The rain isn't the river. The rain just made the river go somewhere it already wanted to go." He looked at Hiruzen to check if that made sense. Hiruzen's chest did something complicated. "Yes," he said quietly. "I understand. I'm not sorry I exist," Naruto said. His voice didn't change. The statement just arrived, clear and flat and completely without aggression, which somehow made it land harder than if he'd shouted it. "I know everyone's going to want me to be. I know what this looks like. But I'm not sorry I exist and I won't say I am." The room was very quiet. "I'm going to need you to stay in the village," Hiruzen said, finally. "For now. While we assess, I'm not going to hurt anyone," Naruto said. "The moon's going down. It's over. I know." Hiruzen looked at him, this strange and terrible child, this boy he had failed in the small ways every day for 7 years and was now looking at the large-scale invoice for that failure. "That's not why I'm asking." Naruto studied him. Then he nodded, once, short. "Good," Hiruzen said. "Go with Hawk. He'll find you somewhere to sleep." He paused. "Naruto." Naruto stopped at the door. "We will talk more. Soon." He held the boy's gaze. "I promise you a real conversation." Naruto didn't say anything to that. But something in his face moved, so briefly it was barely there, and then he was gone, the oversized cloak dragging behind him, and Hiruzen turned to the window and looked out at his burning village and felt every one of his years at once. "Hokage-sama," said one of the Anbu from the shadows. "The council is requesting, the council can wait until sunrise," Hiruzen said. "No. Wait." He turned. "Get me Kakashi." Kakashi Hatake was not in the village when the howl hit. He'd been 3 miles out on a perimeter rotation, solo, the kind of assignment they gave to people who function better with space around them, and he'd felt it from there, not heard it, not initially, but felt it, the same way you felt a change in air pressure before a storm, the deep sensory wrongness of something enormous happening. Then the sound had reached him and he'd stopped moving and stood very still in the forest with his hand on his kunai and his single visible eye very wide, because in all of his experience, and he had more than a man his age should, he had never heard anything that sounded like that. He was back in the village in under 4 minutes. He moved through the gaps in the outer wall, that was going to take some time to normalize, and into the market district, and the damage was not what he would have called total but it was thorough, the kind of thorough that spoke to something moving with consistent force rather than targeted destruction, and the signature of it was entirely wrong. He could read destruction the way other people read weather. This was not a jutsu. Not a weapon. Not even quite a creature, in the way he understood creature. It was something that had moved through the village the way a river moved through a canyon, not intending the canyon but making it regardless. He found Hawk near the administrative district directing the last of the civilian evacuation to the underground shelters. "Casualty count," Kakashi said. Hawk turned. 11 confirmed critical, 40-something injured. No confirmed deaths. He paused. Yet. What did this? Hawk looked at him. Then at the rubble. Then at the faint trail of claw marks in the stone of a surviving wall, massive and casual, for deep grooves at about shoulder height for something that would have been 7 feet tall. "Go see the Hokage," Hawk said. Kakashi sat across from Hiruzen an hour before dawn with a cup of tea he wasn't drinking and listened to the old man tell him about Naruto, and about the primordial blood, and about the Uzumaki clan history that was considerably more complicated than the history books had ever made it, and when Hiruzen finished Kakashi sat with it for a moment. "The kid that nobody let sit at lunch," Kakashi said. Hiruzen closed his eyes briefly. Yes. Did Minato know? He suspected something in the Uzumaki bloodline. He didn't know the scope of it. Neither did I. Hiruzen's jaw was tight. Kushina had episodes. Periods of heightened strength, heightened senses. We attributed them to her Uzumaki vitality. We were wrong. Kakashi turned his cup. What do you need from me? I need someone who can talk to him. Not manage him. Not contain him. Hiruzen looked at him directly. Talk to him. He respects people who treat him like a person. You're good at that, when you choose to be. I'm going to need you to say that again. Don't push it. But there was something briefly human in the old man's face. Then it was gone. He's staying in the lower training barracks tonight. Go now, before the council convenes. Kakashi set down the untouched tea and went. The training barracks were 6 low buildings at the edge of the grounds, used for visiting shinobi and, occasionally, for housing ninja who needed to be nearby but not in custody, the distinction being, as far as Naruto was concerned, mostly academic. He was in the 3rd building. Hawk was outside. 2 more ANBU on the roof. The door wasn't locked. Kakashi knocked anyway. A pause. It's not locked. He went in. The room was a standard barack, 2 cots, a table, a lamp. Naruto was sitting cross-legged on the floor between the cots with the borrowed cloak wrapped around his shoulders and both eyes open, not like someone who'd been woken but like someone who hadn't slept. The lamp was burning low. In its light, Naruto looked like a very tired child, which he was, and also like something else, something that was harder to name, the quality of a space that had recently been the site of something significant. Kakashi sat on the edge of the nearer cot. The silence held for a moment, not uncomfortable. Just settling. "You're Kakashi," Naruto said. "You know me." "I know everyone." "Habit." Naruto looked at the floor. "You don't come in smelling like the others." Kakashi processed that. "How do the others smell?" "Scared. Some of them angry. Most of them both." Naruto's nose twitched, brief and unconscious, still calibrating the new sensory reality. "You smell like, I don't know the word for it. Like a person who decided something a long time ago and stopped being afraid about it." "Grief," Kakashi said. "That's grief." Naruto looked at him. Kakashi met the look with the single visible eye and the deliberate neutrality of a person who had decided years ago that emotional availability was not the same thing as emotional vulnerability. "I didn't mean to," Naruto said. "I know. The Hokage believes me. But the council won't." "The council," Kakashi said carefully, "is going to have a full meeting in about 2 hours and they're going to say things that the Hokage is going to have to navigate. That's not your problem right now." "It's completely my problem," Naruto said, with a matter-of-factness that was almost funny in its accuracy. "I'm the one it happened to. I'm the one it'll happen to again." He said the last part evenly, not distressed, just locating the fact and naming it. "Next full moon is a month away." Kakashi leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. "Can you feel it? The wolf blood?" Naruto tried the phrase out. It fit. "Yes. Now I can. I couldn't before. It was always there but quiet, like hearing something in another room through a closed door. Now the door's open. And the nine tails?" Something shifted in Naruto's face. Not quite what Kakashi would call an expression, more like a weather change, the temperature dropping a degree. "Also loud," Naruto said. "Louder than before." He didn't like tonight. He didn't like someone else's power making noise in his space, Kakashi said. Naruto's eyes cut to him. "Sharp. You know about him." "I knew your father," Kakashi said. The sharpness became something deeper. Naruto went very still, the way animals went still, not frozen but attentive, every sense present and forward. "What?" Kakashi studied him, this impossible child, and thought about all the ways this conversation could go and chose, as he generally did in moments that mattered, the direct one. "Your father was Minato Namikaze," he said. "The fourth Hokage. I was his student." The silence this time was different. Naruto looked at the floor. The lamp flickered. Outside, the pre-dawn was starting, the darkness thinning at the edges, and through the open window Kakashi could hear the sounds of the village beginning its damage assessment, distant voices, moving rubble, the creak of stressed timber. "The face on the monument," Naruto said. "Yes. I cracked it." The words came out flat, but Kakashi heard the weight under them, the specific weight of a child accidentally breaking the only thing they'd wanted. "I cracked his face." "You cracked stone," Kakashi said. "His face is still exactly what it was." Naruto looked up. His eyes were wet, which appeared to surprise him. He blinked, looked away, blinked again, and visibly decided that this was happening and he would not make it a bigger deal than it was. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Set his jaw. "My mother too," he said. "Kushina Uzumaki." Kakashi watched the name land. "She was the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki before you. She was one of the strongest people I ever saw. She also," he added, because it seemed relevant and because being kind in the blunt direction was the only way he knew how to be kind, apparently came from a line of people who had something much older than chakra running in their blood, and nobody figured that out until tonight. Naruto absorbed this. Then, did she know? I don't think she knew what it was. I think she felt it. He paused. I think you probably felt it too, before tonight. Just without knowing what it was. Naruto was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, almost to himself, the dark. I was never scared of the dark. Everyone thinks that's strange for a kid alone in an apartment, but the dark felt right. The moon always felt right. He stopped. Looked at the lamp. I thought there was something wrong with me. There's something different about you, Kakashi said. Different and wrong aren't the same thing. Naruto looked at him sideways. You don't have to say the right things to make me trust you. I know. Kakashi stood up. I'm saying them because they're true. He moved toward the door, then paused. The council meeting happens with or without your input. But if you want to be present for it, I can make that happen. Might be better to be in the room than talked about in it. Naruto didn't answer immediately. He looked at the window, where the sky was going from black to the gray that came before gray became blue. Yeah, he said finally. I want to be in the room. The Hyuga compound had survived the night better than most of the central district. It was built further north, sturdier than the market architecture, and the ancestral construction style of the Hyuga clan leaned toward walls that could outlast disagreements about how thick walls needed to be. There were cracks. A garden wall had come down. 3 windows in the eastern hall had blown out. But the main house stood. Hinata Hyuga was not in the main house. She was in the garden, what remained of it, the fallen wall leaving a gap that opened onto the lane beyond, sitting on a stone bench with her feet not quite reaching the ground and her white eyes very wide and still aimed at the sky. She was 4 years old and the events of the night had deposited her here, past the reach of the maids who'd spent the last hour trying to usher her back inside, in the way that small children sometimes deposited themselves in places adults couldn't make sense of. Her father found her here just after dawn. Hayashi Hyuga stood in the gap of the fallen garden wall and looked at his eldest daughter sitting on the bench in the thin new light and felt the complex parental irritation of a man who is relieved and cannot let it show. Hinata. She looked at him. Her eyes were different this morning, not different in any measurable way, not in the clinical sense that Hayashi was trained to assess, but in the way a person's eyes were different after they'd looked at something significant and were still carrying it. I heard it, she said. Everyone heard it. No. She shook her head, small and certain. Not the way I heard it. She looked back at the sky, which was lightning fast now, the stars going one by one. It was sad. At first. And then it wasn't. She paused. He must have been very lonely. Hayashi went still. Who? Hinata looked at him with the particular patience of small children for adults who are being slow. The person who howled, she said. Hayashi crossed the garden, took her by the hand, and walked her back into the house. He didn't tell her she was wrong. He was a rigid man in most ways but an honest one, and the small true voice of a 4-year-old who had listened to the howl and heard lonely, and it was not something he was going to call incorrect without sitting with it first. He sat with it for a long time that morning, while the clan elders argued and the runners from the Hokage tower came and went, and he didn't reach a conclusion because the problem with truth was that it was not always a conclusion-shaped thing. The council chamber had been moved from its usual room. That ceiling had a crack in it that had made the whole east wall load-bearing in a way it hadn't been yesterday, to the Hokage's primary meeting hall, a wider room with better acoustics that usually served formal missions briefings. It was full. Both civilian and shinobi council members, most of the clan heads, 2 Umbu commanders, and at the end of the long table, in the center chair, Hiruzen with his hands folded and the particular expression of a man who has already decided several things and is about to communicate the decisions in the guise of discussion. Naruto stood at the back of the room. Not seated. He'd walked in with Kakashi and declined the indicated chair and stood against the wall with his arms loose and his eyes moving across the room in the steady, unhurried scan of something calibrating. He was in fresh clothes, someone had found him actual clothes, not a cloak, and he looked like a child who had not slept and was not concerned about it. The council members who noticed him went noticeably quieter. The ones who hadn't noticed him were doing most of the talking. Danzo Shimura was in the third chair on the right side of the table, which was not a power position but was a position of excellent sightlines, and he had not been one of the ones doing the talking. He had been watching Naruto since Naruto walked in, with eyes that were old and specific and interested in the way that was not a comfortable kind of interest. "The primary question," said one of the civilian counselors, a wide man with a merchant's careful gestures, "is containment." "What containment protocols? There are no applicable containment protocols," Kakashi said from the side of the room, calm. "Whatever classification this falls under, there is no protocol written for it." "Then we write one." "You'd have to understand it first," Kakashi said. "We don't, yet." The counselor looked at the room for support. "The damage assessment puts the repair cost at 300 million Rio, Hiruzen said. "I know. I've seen it." He let the number sit. "We will address that." "That is not the first question." "What is the first question?" Danzo said. The room went slightly quieter. Danzo had a voice that did that, not loud, not theatrical, but precisely weighted, each word placed like a chess piece. "The first question," Danzo continued, "is what the asset is, and how it is to be utilized." "He," said a voice from the back of the room. Everyone who hadn't noticed Naruto yet noticed him now. Naruto pushed off the wall and walked forward, unhurried, through the parting of the room that happened the way water parted around a moving object, reflexively, instinctively, the bodies of trained ninjas stepping back not because they decided to but because they had. He walked to the table and stood at its foot, across from Hiruzen, and looked at Danzo. Naruto said again. "Not angry. Not performative. Just corrective. I have a name. I'm also in the room." He looked around at the council. "All of you have been talking about me like I left, so I'm letting you know I didn't." The silence had a texture to it. Danzo looked at him with those steady, measuring eyes. "You're 7 years old," he said. "Yes," Naruto said. "And I destroyed the better part of 3 districts last night without trying. So maybe let me be part of the conversation about what happens next." The civilian counselor made a sound. Kakashi made no sound, but his visible eye carried something that in a different context might have been appreciation. Hiruzen looked at Naruto the way he'd looked at very few people in his very long career, as an equal. "Sit down, then," he said. And indicated the chair at the foot of the table. Naruto sat. The council meeting lasted 3 hours and achieved the specific mixture of productive and maddening that councils generally achieved, which was, several useful decisions, several spectacularly bad suggestions that had to be argued down, and one moment of near collapse when a shinobi council member suggested preemptive neutralization and Naruto had looked at the man with the absolute calm of someone who did not experience the word neutralization as a threat and more as an interesting conversational choice, and the man had stopped talking. The final agreements were these: Naruto would remain in the village. He would be assigned a monitoring protocol that involved chakra sensors being placed at strategic points, not to contain him, Hiruzen had been clear, but to give warning, to the village and to Naruto. He would continue at the academy. The full moon situation would be addressed before the next cycle. That last point was the one nobody had a real answer for yet. After the room had emptied, Naruto stayed in his chair and Hiruzen stayed in his, and the two of them sat in the quiet of the meeting hall with the morning light coming in through windows that had survived the night, and Hiruzen said, "I owe you an apology." Naruto looked at him. "Not for last night specifically," Hiruzen said. "For before. For what your life in this village has been." He held the boy's gaze. "I made choices that I told myself were the best available. I'm not sure they were. I'm not sure I was thinking clearly about what they meant for you day to day." Naruto was quiet for a moment. "Are you apologizing because you mean it or because I'm dangerous now and you want me cooperative?" Hiruzen smiled, very slightly. "Both," he said. "Those aren't mutually exclusive." Naruto looked at the table. Then he said, "My parents. Minato and Kushina. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because telling a small child who his father was, without the ability to protect him from what that information would do in the village," Hiruzen paused. It was a choice. I won't claim it was the right one. Kakashi told me, Naruto said. This morning. Hiruzen's expression flickered. Yes. I had asked him to talk to you, though perhaps not. No, it was fine. Naruto said it quickly, like he was correcting a small error. It was fine. He told me straight. I'd rather have it straight. He looked at the table. Are there other things I should know? Straight? Hiruzen was quiet for 3 seconds. 4. The specific weight of a man measuring honesty against protection and beginning, perhaps too late, to get the ratio right. Yes, he said finally. There are. The body was found at noon. 1 ANBU, in the rubble of the Eastern Administrative Building, buried under 2 floors of collapsed masonry. Not killed by the collapse, the initial report was unclear, the damage confusing, but Kakashi went and looked because it was his job to look at things that were unclear, and came back to Hiruzen's office 40 minutes later with a specific type of quiet around him. Sword wound, he said. Pre-collapse. The rubble came down on top of him after. Hiruzen set down his brush. Show me the mask. Kakashi set a cracked ANBU mask on the desk. Ow. Hiruzen looked at it for a long time. Was he on duty last night? Yes. Eastern perimeter. He should have been 200 meters from where we found him. And the wound? Clean. Fast. Someone who knew exactly where to put it. Kakashi's eye was flat. The collapse covered it. If I hadn't looked specifically, someone used the chaos, Hiruzen said. Someone very precise used the chaos, Kakashi said. Someone who knew there would be chaos to use. He paused. The ANBU's name was Tenzo. He was one of the 3 people in this village who had complete access to the root program files. The room was quiet. Hiruzen and Kakashi looked at each other across the desk with the specific communication of men who had worked together long enough to have a shorthand for the things they couldn't say in rooms that might not be private. Danzo, Hiruzen said. Not a question. I have no proof, Kakashi said. Of course you don't. Hiruzen stood. Looked out the empty window frame at the damaged village. Last night created a great deal of useful cover. Yes. Kakashi paused. And Danzo voted, in council, to begin profiling the boy's power for potential weaponization. He was the only one who voted that way. He didn't push it hard. Didn't argue when it was declined. Because he was noting where people stood, Hiruzen said quietly. Not advocating a position. That's my read. Hiruzen's hands were clasped behind his back. Outside, the cleanup crews were moving through the market district, the sounds of recovery organized and purposeful, his village doing what it had always done, which was put itself back together, because that was a thing it knew how to do. What it didn't know how to do, what it had never had a protocol for, was the boy who had taken it apart. And that boy was 7 years old and had the oldest blood in the world and was right now, probably, sitting somewhere alone because that was what he'd always done and habits didn't die in a single night even when everything else changed. Find him a teacher, Hiruzen said. You can't teach what he is. No. But you can walk next to it. Hiruzen looked at Kakashi. Walk next to him. Naruto was, in fact, sitting alone. Not in the barracks, he'd left there after the council meeting, moving through the damaged village with his new senses drinking in the scope of the recovery effort, the shouted coordinates and the chakra flares of medics and the specific smell of old stone dust that was like nothing else on earth. He'd found, eventually, the one place in the village he'd always gone when he needed to think, which was the roof of the academy building, accessed via the big oak tree on the eastern side that had a branch that reached almost to the gutter. The oak had survived. He sat on the roof with his knees up and looked out over the village and let the morning work on him. The sky was clear and bright, absolutely indifferent to the proceedings below, and the sun was the specific warm yellow of mid-morning, and somewhere in the rubble of the market district he could hear, very faintly, the clatter of the Ichiraku stall framework being salvaged. The wolf blood was quiet. A deep, settled quiet, like the kind of sleep that comes after serious exhaustion, not absent, not dormant, just resting. He could still feel all of it, the range of his senses, the weight of his own presence in the world, the peripheral awareness of 60 people working within 300 meters of him and the individual sound of each of their heartbeats. It was a lot. He was learning to organize it, the way you learn to work in a noisy room. He heard her before he saw her. One heartbeat. Small and quick, and at the base of the oak tree, the specific rhythm of a child who is trying very hard to be brave and is mostly succeeding. Then the sound of small hands on bark, and small feet finding the first branch, and the slow determined progress of someone who had decided to climb a tree they had probably not climbed before. He watched the top of the ladder. Hinata Hyuga came over the edge of the gutter with both hands gripping hard and both eyes very wide and a leaf in her hair from the oak. She had clearly never been on a roof before. She didn't let go of the gutter for a moment, kneeling there at the edge with her feet still on the top rung of the branch, assessing the flat surface in front of her with the specific concentration of someone making a genuine risk calculation. Then she let go of the gutter, stood up, and walked across the roof to where Naruto was sitting, and sat down about 3 feet away from him, and looked at the village, and said nothing. He said nothing either. The silence lasted for maybe 2 minutes. The sounds of the cleanup drifted up to them, the village putting itself back together one shouted instruction at a time. I live in the compound, Hinata said finally. The north one. She pointed. It didn't fall down. I know, Naruto said. I could hear which ones fell. She considered that. That must have been very loud. It was. Another pause. Are you okay? She asked. He turned to look at her. She was 4 years old and had white eyes and a leaf in her dark hair and was looking at him with an expression that had absolutely no performance in it, not bravery, not charity, not the specific careful neutrality of adults who were trying to be fair. Just the simple, direct question of a small person who wanted to know the answer. No, Naruto said. Not really. She nodded, like this was a reasonable and expected answer. My mother died, she said. Last year. And for a long time after, everyone kept asking if I was okay and I kept saying yes. She looked at the village. It's easier to say no. Yeah, Naruto said. Something in his chest moved, small and careful, a door opening on a hinge that hadn't been oiled in a while. Yeah, it is. They sat together on the roof while the village worked below them, 2 small people in the aftermath of a very large night, and the sun moved overhead, and the wolf blood rested, and for the first time in a life defined by the specific silence of rooms that wouldn't let him in, Naruto Uzumaki sat in a silence that someone had chosen to share with him. It felt different. It felt, actually, like the beginning of something. In the deep cage of the seal, Kurama was not resting. He sat in the dark behind his bars and turned over what he had felt last night with the particular irritated attention of something very proud that has just been surprised. The wolf blood had not surprised him in the way of a shock, he'd felt it coming, in the final weeks before the transformation, the way you felt a storm coming when you could read weather. What had surprised him was the register. He was old. 9-tailed foxes carried history in their bones and he was the oldest, the strongest, the apex of his kind, and he had a reference point for almost every power the human world had produced since the Sage of 6 Paths organized the chakra system and started the whole complicated business. The wolf blood had no reference point. It sat below his register entirely. It was like trying to compare the height of mountains by measuring them from the moon. The mountain was tall, the mountain was very tall, but the moon didn't have a unit for it. He didn't like that. What he liked even less was the boy. The specific quality of the boy, the way he'd walked through the ruins of his own making without collapsing into it, without begging, without performing. The way he'd looked at the council with those blue eyes and said he like it was a correction that needed making. The way, in the seal's shared space, the wolf blood and the 9-tails chakra coexisted in a silence that was not the silence of competition but the silence of 2 very old things deciding they were going to have to share quarters whether they liked it or not. Kurama put one large paw on the floor of his cage and looked through the bars into the dark, at the boy's interior life the way he could always see it, and what he saw there was not what he'd expected. Not chaos. Not damage. Something patient and certain and very, very deep, like standing at the edge of a gorge and throwing a stone in and not hearing it land. He hated it. He was also, and this was the part he was not going to examine closely right now, beginning to be curious. The boy was going to do something with what he was. That much was already visible, you could read it in him the way you read terrain, the sense of a direction already chosen and a pace already set. He wasn't going to apologize and he wasn't going to hide and he wasn't going to wait for the village to decide he was worth something. The village, Kurama thought, was going to find that very inconvenient. He settled back in his cage and closed his eyes and thought about something Minato Namikaze had said to him on the night of the sealing, right at the end when the man was already mostly gone and running on the specific desperate fuel of a parent with no other options. He'd said, "He'll surprise you." Kurama had dismissed it as the sentimental noise of a dying man. He was revising that position. Chapter 3, The world outside the walls. The village repaired faster than anyone expected, which said something about Konoha that its inhabitants generally preferred not to examine too closely, that it had enough practice with catastrophe to be efficient at recovery, that the organizational muscles for putting things back together were well developed from regular use. Within a week, the market stalls were skeleton frames waiting for roofing. Within 2, the outer wall gaps were patched. Within 3, the administrative district was a construction site that smelled like fresh stone and ambition. Naruto watched all of it from the periphery because he was not invited to participate and did not push for it. He understood the logic, even if he didn't particularly enjoy it. His presence near the construction sites made the workers nervous, not performing nervous, not the calculated social exclusion he'd grown up with, but the specific physical nervousness of bodies that remembered the howl and had not finished processing it. He could smell it on them when he walked nearby. The slight elevation in heart rate, the cortisol spike, the way conversations lost their rhythm for the seconds it took him to pass. It wasn't malice. It was biology. The mammal brain remembering what it had heard that night and responding accordingly, the way a hand pulled back from a hot surface before the thinking brain caught up. He found this more interesting than upsetting, which was a change from how he'd related to the village's rejection before. Before, the exclusion had been personal, directed at him specifically, the demon kid, the outcast, laden with the specific cruelty of community ostracism. This was different. This was the animal world responding to something it correctly identified as apex, and there was a layer of him now that understood that distinction clearly and did not experience it as pain. Kurama, who had started talking to him more, still contemptuous, still carrying the tone of something that found the entire situation beneath its dignity, but talking, had put it bluntly one night. "They're not excluding you. They're making space. There's a difference." "Doesn't feel different," Naruto had said. "That's because you've spent 7 years learning one interpretation of people moving away from you. Learn the other one." He was working on it. The academy continued. Hiruzen had made that non-negotiable, and Naruto hadn't argued. The academy was the one place where the routine of it, the structured hours, the specific demands of learning something technical, gave him a framework for the days that the new sensory landscape of his existence otherwise made shapeless. He could hear every conversation in the building simultaneously if he wasn't careful, which meant he'd had to develop a kind of deliberate attention management, focusing his hearing the way you focused your eyes, choosing what to attend to. The other students had rearranged themselves around him. Not the old rearrangement, the pointed, socially orchestrated moving of chairs and shifting of lunch groups, but a new one, more organic. There was a radius around him in the classroom that the other kids maintained without apparent decision, a comfortable distance that varied by individual. Some sat closer than before, drawn by something they couldn't have articulated. Most maintained or increased their distance. Shikamaru Nara, who Naruto had assessed within 30 seconds of entering his first academy class as the most intelligent person in the room and also the least bothered by anything, had moved his desk 2 feet closer to Naruto's during the 3rd week and then proceeded to sleep through the next 4 lessons in apparent complete indifference to his own choice. Naruto found this oddly reassuring. The one person whose radius had fully collapsed was Hinata, who came and found him on the academy roof every day at lunch with the same determined certainty she'd shown on that first morning and sat within arm's reach and ate her food and talked or didn't talk as the mood required. She was 4 years old, he was 7, and the age gap should have made them strange companions, but Hinata had the specific quality of some children of seeming to inhabit a social age that bore little relationship to their chronological one, and they'd found a register between them that worked. She asked him questions about the wolf blood without any apparent fear and with enormous curiosity. Not the academic curiosity of someone cataloging a threat but the genuine curiosity of someone who had decided something was interesting and wanted to understand it. "Can you hear my heartbeat right now?" she'd asked, on maybe the 5th lunch. "Yes." "What does it sound like?" He'd thought about it. "Fast. Like a bird. Steady though." She'd seemed pleased by this. "Can you hear everyone's?" "If I pay attention." "I don't, usually. It's like, you know how you can hear the wind but you're not listening to the wind? It's background. I tune it in when I need to." "That's amazing," she'd said, with simple sincerity, and then eaten the rest of her rice ball. He didn't have many other interactions in the academy that felt like that. Most were navigated around the new awareness, the changed social topography of a classroom where everyone was dealing with the fact that one of their classmates had, 3 weeks ago, destroyed a significant portion of their village during what the official academy communication had called an unforeseeable medical event. The kids were too young to fully absorb what that meant politically, but they were old enough to absorb what it meant physically, and the ones who'd been awake that night still carried it differently than the ones who'd slept through it. Kakashi came by twice a week. Not with a lesson plan, not with a training protocol, he'd made it clear early that he wasn't there to train Naruto in the conventional sense and that anybody who thought the wolf blood was something you could be trained in had a fundamental misunderstanding of what the wolf blood was. He came by and talked. About Minato, sometimes, in the careful measured way of a man describing someone he'd loved. About Kushina, in the different careful way of someone who had known a person less well and was being honest about the limits of that knowledge. About the village, about the shinobi world, about the history of things that Naruto was now, by circumstance, in the middle of. It was, Naruto thought, the closest thing to a genuine education he'd received since starting the academy, because it was information delivered without agenda, without the implicit calculus of what he was supposed to do with it. What none of it addressed was the full moon, which was now 11 days away. Hiruzen had put 3 separate research teams on the question and received 3 separate answers that were all variations of "we don't know enough yet," which was not useful but was at least honest. The Uzumaki clan archives in Konoha were limited, most of the clan's knowledge had gone with Uzushio when it fell, and what remained was fragmentary, personal journals and mission reports and partial ritual texts that gave the researchers the shape of a thing without the substance. Primordial bloodlines were not a documented category. The closest analogues were the clans with Kekii Genkai, but Kekii Genkai were chakra-based mutations, comprehensible within the existing system, and whatever the wolf blood was, it wasn't that. Hiruzen had also sent runners to 2 locations, Mayaboku Mountain and wherever in the world Jiraiya of the Sannin currently was, which was a question that took 3 days to answer because Jiraiya moved around in the particular way of a man who valued his privacy from official correspondence. The runner found him in Wind Country. Jiraiya was sitting in a tea house in a town 3 days' travel from Suna, drinking something that was technically tea but had been significantly improved, working on a manuscript that he would eventually claim was for research purposes, when the runner came through the door and handed him the scroll. He read it twice. Then he set down his cup, rolled the scroll tight, looked at the ceiling of the tea house for a long moment, and said something that the young couple at the adjacent table would later describe to their friends as the most creative profanity they'd ever heard from a man of his age. He was on the road within the hour. Naruto felt him coming before he arrived. Not his chakra specifically, he hadn't been trained to read chakra signatures the way sensors were trained, and his father's student was too experienced to be readable at that range anyway. What he felt was something else, the wolf blood's territorial sense, the deep map awareness of approaches to claimed space, the same thing that had catalogued every living person in the village and their relative position. A significant presence, moving fast from the south, carrying the specific sense signature that his new senses were only beginning to learn to translate into information, old power, old sweat, a lot of road, something bookish underneath all of it. He was on the roof of the academy when the man came through the gate. He watched him from the distance. Big, white-haired, moving with the ease of someone who had been a powerful person for so long that power had stopped being an event and become a baseline. The village responded to him the way the village responded to people it trusted, the checkpoint guard standing down, a few people in the street turning to look with recognition, someone calling out a greeting from a second-floor window. Jiraiya of the Sannin stopped in the middle of the road, looked up at the academy building, and found Naruto on the roof immediately, without scanning, without searching. Their eyes met across 300 meters. Jiraiya stared for a long moment. Then he did something Naruto hadn't expected, which was that he sat down. Just sat down cross-legged in the road, ignoring the mild traffic confusion this created, and looked up at the roof. Naruto looked back down. They stayed like that for about 30 seconds. Then Naruto climbed down the oak tree and walked across to the road and stood in front of the white-haired man who was sitting in the road and being stared at by two cart drivers and one confused Chunin. "You're Jiraiya," Naruto said. "You're Naruto." Jiraiya looked at him with the eyes of a man who was doing a very complicated thing with his face, which was trying to hold grief and curiosity and something that was almost reverence without letting any of them spill into the others. "You have your mother's nose." Naruto blinked. "And your father's," Jiraiya studied him more. "Honestly, the rest is something I've never seen before." "What are you doing on the school roof?" "Thinking." "About?" "The full moon," Naruto said. "In 10 days. Jiraiya was quiet for 3 seconds. Then he got up off the road, dusted his hands, and looked down at this small and considerably strange child. "I might actually be able to help with that," he said. "Might?" "Probably. I've been doing a lot of thinking on the road. Reading Kushina's personal notes. Talking to a toad sage." He scratched the back of his head. "I have a theory. It's not tested." "Better than nothing," Naruto said. "Yeah." Jiraiya looked at the village, the fresh stone of the repaired walls, the construction scaffolding still up in the administrative district. The full weight of what the scroll had told him was visible for a moment in his face, then packed away. "Walk with me," he said. "I need ramen and a conversation." "In that order." "Ichiraku's is still rebuilding," Naruto said. "The West Side Market has a decent place though. Lead the way, kid." They sat across from each other in a noodle shop that was too small for Jiraiya's shoulders and had a menu with exactly 4 items, and Naruto watched the man eat with the single-minded focus of someone who had been on the road for 3 days and had run most of the last one, and waited until the first bowl was empty before asking the question he'd been organizing since the roof. "What do you know about the wolf blood?" he said. Jiraiya set the bowl down. "More than I knew a week ago. Less than I want to." He gestured for a second bowl and leaned back against the wall. "The Uzumaki clan was, look, everybody knows they were long-lived, strong vitality, seal masters. That's the public record. What the public record doesn't have is the older stuff." He tapped the table. "The clan had an origin ritual. Very old, pre-Konoha, probably pre-village era. It was a pact. Their ancestors made a pact with what they called the first wolf, the primordial, the original, the thing that came before chakra and before the sage and before the organizational principle that turned wild power into a system." Naruto was very still, listening with his whole body, the wolf blood's ancient attentiveness turned on fully. The pact gave them their vitality. Their sealing affinity. Their life force, the kind that made Kushina essentially walk off the nine tails being ripped out of her long enough to say goodbye. That was never just Uzumaki toughness. Jiraiya paused. And in rare cases, in whatever alignment of birth circumstances and lunar timing and chakra inheritance, the pact didn't just give a gift. It gave the whole thing. Me, Naruto said. You. Jiraiya looked at him steadily. Born under a blood moon, on the same night the Nine Tails attacked, to a mother whose seal was being forcibly disrupted. The pact interpreted all of that as a triggering condition. You got the full inheritance. He spread his hands. The first wolf's blood, whole and undiluted. Naruto turned this over. Is it separate from me? Like the Nine Tails is separate? No, Jiraiya said, and this seemed important to him, the way he leaned forward to say it. That's the crucial difference. Kurama is a being sealed inside you. The wolf blood is you. It's not inside you, it's not a separate consciousness, it's as much you as your heartbeat. Something settled in Naruto's chest at that. Something that had been slightly unmoored since the night of the transformation found an anchor. He didn't say anything about it, just noted where it landed. So what do we do about the full moon? He asked. The Toad Sage had a suggestion, Jiraiya said. He called it anchoring. The transformation is driven by the moon pulling on the blood, it's a gravitational thing, in the old sense, the primordial relationship between the lunar cycle and the wolf lineage. You can't stop the moon. But you can build a counterweight. He paused. Consciousness. Deliberate presence. The transformation went full because it hit you when you had no framework for it, no awareness of what was happening. With awareness, with practice before the next cycle, you think I can stay me, Naruto said. During the transformation. I think you can stay you and become the other thing, Jiraiya said. Not one or the other. Both. Which is what the first wolf bloodline was always supposed to be, not possession, not an override. Integration. Naruto looked at the table. What does practice look like? Jiraiya met his eyes. Difficult. Probably painful. And we have 10 days. I've had worse. Jiraiya looked at him for a moment, this child who had matter-of-factly just noted he'd had worse than difficult and painful, and did the face thing again, the complicated holding of many things at once, and then he said, very quietly, yeah. I know you have, kid. I know. They trained in the northern forest. Jiraiya had pushed for the training grounds, Hiruzen had agreed, and then Naruto had taken one look at the training grounds and said he needed more space than that, and the thing about Naruto saying he needed more space in the specific flat tone that he used when he was stating a fact rather than making a preference was that it didn't leave a lot of room for disagreement. The northern forest was 3 miles outside the village wall, dense pine, the kind of place that absorbed sound and motion, that smelled of resin and old earth. They trained there for 10 days. It was not like any training Naruto had heard about from the academy. There was no form instruction, no chakra control exercise, no taijutsu kata. Jiraiya sat on a large rock and talked, about the moon, about the Uzumaki pact, about what the Toad Sages knew of ancient blood contracts, about the relationship between consciousness and transformation, and Naruto listened and then tried things, the way you tried things with your body when someone gave you a conceptual framework and let you find the physical translation yourself. The wolf blood responded to his deliberate attention differently than it had responded to the moon's pull. When he focused inward, the way the meditation techniques he'd read about half-accidentally in the academy library suggested, it was like finding a frequency. Present and enormous but organizable, the way radio static resolved into signal when you turned the dial to the right spot. On the third day, he changed. Deliberately. Consciously. In full daylight with no moon in sight, with Jiraiya on the rock watching with an expression that had gone significantly past his professional calm, Naruto sat in the grass and breathed and found the frequency and turned the dial. It was slower than the first time. Less violent. Like the difference between a flood and a tide, the same water, entirely different relationship with the shore. He grew. The claws came. The fur, the size, the silver eyes. But he was there, inside all of it, the way a person was there inside their body during a fever, feeling the altered state from within, aware of it, present in it. He looked at his hands, massive, dark-furred, ending in those impossible claws, and flexed them, deliberate, controlled. He looked at Jiraiya. Jiraiya was holding his face in a very specific expression that Naruto would later identify as the look of a man who has spent his career in extraordinary proximity to power and is recalibrating what extraordinary means. "Well," Jiraiya said. His voice was impressively even. "That's day 3. "Yes," said a voice. "Not Kurama." "Lower. Older." The voice from the first night, the one that had said awaken, the voice of something that predated language and was using it now anyway because he was using it, because it was his voice too. "Good," the voice said. "You remembered. What are you?" Naruto said, aloud, because aloud seemed right. Silence. Then, the way a very old thing might answer a question about its own nature with the patience of something that had answered the question before, across many iterations, "I am what was before the naming of things. You are what I became when I chose a name. We are not separate. You are asking me what you are." "Yeah," Naruto said. "I am." "Enough," said the first wolf. "Walk in the form. Talk later." He walked through the northern forest in the full form, the wolf blood fully present, fully conscious, fully Naruto, and it was a completely different experience than the night of the transformation. That night had been a river in flood. This was a river in full bank, knowing exactly where the water went, feeling the current as information rather than chaos. The forest floor registered his passage differently than it had a week ago. He was heavy in the form, seriously heavy, and the pine needles compressed to a depth that suggested his weight in this state was something considerably beyond what his 7-year-old body implied. He moved between the trees with a precision that the form's size should not have allowed and did anyway because precision was not about size, it was about attention, and his attention in the wolf form was the kind of total that nothing else in his experience had approached. He ran. Not sprinting, running, the long ground-eating lope of something built for distance, the gait that covered territory, and the distance he covered in the minutes before Jiraiya's voice pulled him back was enough to make the man, who was tracking him through his chakra and through the regular cracking sounds of undergrowth, sit up very straight on his rock. When Naruto came back through the trees, he transitioned back without effort, tide going out, easy and natural, the human form reassembling itself with the same unhurried quality as the transformation had occurred. He stood in the clearing and looked at Jiraiya and felt, for the second time in this experience, that thing that was more than right, that complete and catastrophic sense of himself. This time he didn't hate it. "We have 7 days, Jiraiya said. His voice was doing the complex holding thing again. "I know," Naruto said. "You're going to be okay," Jiraiya said. And then, like he surprised himself, more than okay. "I think you're going to be something the world doesn't have words for yet." Naruto looked at the forest, the long angles of afternoon light through the pine. "Minato," he said. The name still felt strange in his mouth, unfamiliar, like wearing someone else's shoes. What was he like? Jiraiya was quiet for a moment. "You want the real version or the monument version?" "Real." He laughed at his own jokes, Jiraiya said. "Even the bad ones, especially the bad ones." He cried at 2 things, his students getting hurt and very specific passages of poetry that he would die before admitting he'd memorized. He paused. He was afraid. Every mission, every time. He just decided to go anyway, every time, and the deciding was so fast it looked like he wasn't afraid at all. He looked at Naruto carefully. "He would have, don't," Naruto said. "Not harsh. Just clear. I know what you're going to say. Save it for when I need to hear it." A pause. Then Jiraiya smiled, and it was not the performed smile of someone managing a difficult conversation but the genuine article, brief and real. "You are extremely like him," he said. In ways that have nothing to do with the face. The full moon came on a cloudless night. They were in the northern forest, in the largest clearing, with Jiraiya 50 meters back and Kakashi, who had come quietly and without fuss and taken a position in the tree line in a way that communicated "I'm here if you need a witness" without communicating anything about intervention, further back still. Naruto stood in the center of the clearing. He felt the moon before he saw it, the rise of it, the pull, the ancient calling between the lunar mass and the blood that answered it. It was stronger than the tide he'd been practicing with, significantly stronger, the difference between a stream and the ocean. He felt it come up through the soles of his feet and through the backs of his hands and behind his eyes, the whole of the blood responding to the whole of the moon with the completeness of something that had been doing this before there were eyes to see the moon with. He breathed. Found the frequency. Turned the dial. The transformation came, fast, full, the complete expression of the wolf blood, larger and more present than the daylight practice runs, and Naruto was there for every second of it, not overwhelmed, not submerged. He felt the clearing from the center of it, felt Jiraiya's heartbeat behind him and Kakashi's behind that, felt the whole sleeping forest organized around him, and the first wolf's voice was there, quiet and present, the deepest layer of his own consciousness. "There you are," it said. "Here I am," Naruto said. He tilted his head back. He howled. The sound moved through the forest, up through the canopy, out across the dark. It was different from the first time, not the sound of something waking violently from a long sleep, not the sound of territory being claimed in ignorance. It was the sound of something that knew exactly what it was, standing in the center of what it had come from, telling the night directly. In the village 3 miles south, people woke. Heard it. Felt it in their ribs. But this time, nobody ran. This time, several people who had lived in Konoha their whole lives stepped to their windows and looked north at the dark tree line and felt something they didn't have a name for, something old, something that lived in the mammal brain below the trained mind and the political mind and the social mind. They felt it, and some of them were afraid and some of them weren't, and one small girl in a compound on the north side of the village sat up in bed and smiled, just a little, in the dark. In the clearing, Naruto came down from the howl. He stood in the moonlight, fully transformed, fully himself, completely in possession of both things that he was simultaneously, and he looked up at the moon with the silver eyes that were his eyes, that had always been his eyes, the eyes he'd been born with that had just finally opened all the way. Jiraiya came out of the trees. He walked to the clearing's edge and stopped, looking at the shape of his godson, silver-lit and ancient and 7 years old all at once, and he put his hand over his mouth briefly, and then he took it away and stood up straight and said, "Minato. You absolute show-off." He wasn't talking to Naruto. Naruto heard it anyway. He transitioned back, easy as breathing, and stood in the clearing in human form and looked at the man who had known his father. Jiraiya was composed again, but the edges of it were still wet and he wasn't doing a perfect job of hiding it, and Naruto, with the wolf blood's unflinching sensory clarity, didn't pretend not to notice. "Thank you," Naruto said. Jiraiya blinked. "For what?" "For coming." He said it simply, without dramatics. "You didn't have to." Jiraiya looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, gruff and quick, "Yeah, well. Don't make it weird." And turned away to check something in his pack, and the turned-away posture gave him about 3 seconds to be something other than composed. Naruto let him have the 3 seconds. Then Kakashi came out of the trees and the three of them stood in the moonlit clearing, and the full moon moved overhead in its ancient indifferent arc, and the forest settled back into its normal night sounds, the insects resuming, the owls resuming, the whole apparatus of the living dark returning to its baseline. "So," Kakashi said. "That's handled." "That one's handled," Naruto said. "Every full moon is handled now, I think." "You think?" Jiraiya said, recovered now and back to the dry register. "Very reassuring." "I'm 7, Naruto said. "What do you want?" Jiraiya opened his mouth. Closed it. Looked at Kakashi. "He does that," Kakashi said. "You get used to it." "What?" Being correct and annoying simultaneously. Exactly that. They walked back through the forest toward the village, the white-haired man and the silver-haired man and the boy between them who was neither fully child nor fully ancient thing but both at once, who had the oldest blood in the world and his mother's nose and his father's determination and a voice inside him older than either of them that was, at this exact moment, in the aftermath of a full moon that had gone the right way for the first time, quietly and specifically content. 3 weeks after the full moon, the bounty notice went up. Naruto found it by smell, the fresh paper and ink of a new posting on the mission board near the Hokage Tower, and the specific chemical signature that meant it had been handled by multiple people who were each carrying the flat adrenaline of something they found significant. He went to look because he was 7 and had the social self-awareness of someone who had learned to read the room through necessity and the smell reading of a predator, and both of those things were telling him the posting was relevant. His face on the bounty notice was done from a description rather than a likeness and was consequently not very accurate, too much jaw, wrong nose, didn't have the whisker marks at the right angle, but the details below it were accurate enough. Naruto Uzumaki. Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. Carrier of the Primordial Wolf bloodline. Bounty, 40 million Ryo, alive. Contact, cipher address that Naruto, who had excellent eyes and the wolf blood's pattern recognition, identified in about 6 seconds as a Rain Country routing code. He stood in front of the board and read it twice. Then he took it down, folded it, and put it in his pocket. He was halfway to the Hokage Tower when the 2 Chunin on board duty caught up to him. "Kid, that's official, I know what it is," Naruto said, not stopping. "I'm going to show the Hokage. You can't just, are you going to make me give it back?" He said it conversationally, over his shoulder, without slowing down. The 2 Chunin exchanged a look. Neither of them made a move. He kept walking. Hiruzen read the bounty notice with the specific stillness of a man who had been expecting something in this category without knowing exactly what shape it would take. He set it down. Folded his hands. 40 million is a significant number, he said. "It'll go up," Naruto said. "I expect it'll go up a lot." Hiruzen looked at him, the 7-year-old sitting across from him with the matter-of-fact assessment of a person who has decided to look at their situation clearly and has found the exercise bracing rather than distressing. "You're not worried about it?" "I'm interested in it," Naruto said. Someone put that out 3 weeks after the full moon. They were watching. They know about the wolf blood and they know about the Nine Tails and they think both of those things are things I can be separated from. He looked at the notice on Hiruzen's desk. "They're wrong about the wolf blood. They might think they're not wrong about the Nine Tails." "Orochimaru," Hiruzen said. "Is that who this is?" Hiruzen was quiet for a beat. "We don't have confirmation. The routing code is, Rain Country." "I know." Naruto looked at him steadily. "Kakashi told me Orochimaru left the village. He told me a little about why. He didn't tell me what Orochimaru wants." Hiruzen leaned back, this old man with his village and his pipe and the very long ledger of difficult choices. "Orochimaru wants to understand everything," he said finally. "Every power, every bloodline, every secret the world has ever produced. He wants to know it all and hold it all and be beyond the reach of death, which is the one thing that ends knowledge." He paused. "You represent something he has never encountered in 60 years of study. Something that shouldn't exist within his framework. Something that rewrites what he knows about what power is." Naruto absorbed this. "So he doesn't want to control me. He wants to study you," Hiruzen said. "To understand you. Possibly to," he stopped. "Replicate it," Naruto said. Hiruzen looked at him. "Yes. That's scarier," Naruto said. "Not with fear. With the specific analytical interest of someone who finds the genuine danger more compelling than the simple danger. Somebody trying to control me is just a fight. Somebody trying to understand what I am and make more of it is," he thought for a moment. "That's something else." "Yes," Hiruzen said quietly. "It is." They looked at each other across the desk, the old man and the child, and the morning light came in through the repaired window, new glass, still clean, not yet fogged with Konoha's particular dust, and somewhere below in the village the construction sounds were ongoing, the village putting itself back together nail by nail. And Naruto thought about old men who wanted to understand power and villages that were good at recovering and bounty notices with wrong angle whisker marks, and found that all of it, taken together, felt less like a threat than like a problem getting clear enough to be solved. I want to be told things, he said. When you know them. Not managed. Told. Yes, Hiruzen said. I'm learning that. Good. Naruto stood. I'm going to go train. With Jiraiya. And Kakashi. And, he added, at the door, by myself, after. I want to see how fast I can actually go. I don't think I know yet. He left. Hiruzen sat in his office and listened to the footsteps on the stairs, quick, light, the footsteps of someone who was moving with purpose, and then he reached for his pipe and his writing brush simultaneously, because there was the letter to Jiraiya to write and there was the thing he needed to sit with quietly for a moment before he wrote it, which was the feeling of watching something enormous become itself in real time. It was not a comfortable feeling. But it was, he thought, filling the pipe, watching the morning settle over his repaired village, an honest one. Chapter 4, The Sage's Shadow. 8 months after the night the moon bled, Naruto was fast enough to cross the northern forest in 40 seconds. He knew this because he'd timed it. Jiraiya had a pocket watch, a battered brass thing with a crack across the face that he claimed was sentimental damage and Kakashi claimed was carelessness, and they'd set up markers at each end of the tree line and let Naruto run it until the number stopped changing. 40 seconds was apparently where he plateaued, which Jiraiya had noted in his research journal with the specific handwriting of someone who was writing things down carefully because they needed to think about them before they said them out loud. Full wolf form. 3 miles. 40 seconds. For reference, Kakashi, who was the fastest human Naruto had personally encountered, ran it in 4 minutes 20 on his best day. The fastest recorded shinobi sprint on the mission board was a jonin from the previous generation who'd done a measured mile in under 2 minutes during a wartime retreat, and that was considered exceptional enough to have been written down and kept. You need to stop timing it, Kakashi said one morning, leaning against a tree with his book open. Why? Because you're already thinking about what the number means in terms of a fight and you should be thinking about what it means in terms of you. Naruto looked at him. What's the difference? Kakashi turned a page. One of them makes you a weapon. The other one makes you yourself. I can be both. Yes, Kakashi said. That's what I'm worried about. It was the kind of exchange they had regularly now, the two of them, the specific friction of a student who didn't need instruction and a teacher who had stopped pretending to offer it and instead had settled into something more like a sustained argument about how to be what Naruto was. Naruto found it more useful than anything the academy taught, not because Kakashi was always right but because Kakashi was always honest about what he didn't know, which was a rarer quality than being right. Jiraiya's contribution was different. Jiraiya brought information, clan histories, toad sage wisdom, his own prodigious research into bloodline anomalies and ancient power systems, and delivered it in the specific style of a man who had written 15 volumes on human nature and had strong opinions about how stories were told. He also cooked, badly, and complained about wind country dust getting into his manuscripts, and occasionally stared at Naruto for long stretches with an expression that had nothing academic in it. Naruto had started calling him Jiraiya-sensei 3 months in, casually, without announcement, the way you'd change a habit rather than declare one. Jiraiya had stopped talking mid-sentence the first time it happened, collected himself, and then spoken slightly faster than usual for the rest of that session, which Naruto had noted and not commented on. The three of them had a rhythm. It wasn't family and it wasn't a team in the academy sense, it was something more functional than the first and less formal than the second, 3 people who had found a working configuration and were running with it. But the configuration was about to change. The message arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under Naruto's Baroque door overnight, no seal, no signature, written on paper that Naruto's senses placed at roughly 6 hours old when he found it in the morning, meaning it had been placed around 2 in the morning, by hands that carried no fear scent and no chakra signature he recognized. The handwriting was elegant. Precise. The kind of handwriting that came from someone who had written a great many things and cared about the act of writing. It said, "There are answers I have that Sarutobi doesn't. Meet me at the old stone bridge north of the 3rd training ground at sunset. Come alone if you're curious. Bring your entourage if you need to feel safe. I'll be there either way." It wasn't signed. It didn't need to be. Naruto read it twice, folded it, and went to find Jiraiya. Jiraiya's reaction covered a lot of ground very quickly. The first 3 seconds were alarm, the next 2 were something older and darker than alarm, and then his professional composure closed over both of those and he read the note again with the flat expression of a man reviewing intelligence rather than reacting to it. "He's in the village," Jiraiya said. "Or was," Naruto said. 6 hours ago. Being in this village 6 hours ago without the sensors picking him up is, Jiraiya stopped. Actually possible for him. Deeply annoying, but possible. He handed the note back. "You're not going alone." "I know. You're not going at all." "I'm going," Naruto said. "But I wanted you to know." Jiraiya looked at him. The specific look of a man who has just been given the courtesy of information without the courtesy of a vote. He recognized it because Minato had done it too, that clean distinction between telling someone and asking them, and finding it in the godson he hadn't known until 8 months ago landed in a complicated place. "Kakashi and I will be 50 meters back," Jiraiya said finally. "Fine. If anything, I'll howl," Naruto said. "You'll hear it. In the village, half asleep, 3 miles away, I heard it," Jiraiya said. "Yes, I'll hear it." The old stone bridge north of the 3rd training ground was exactly what it sounded like, a bridge over a stream that nobody used for anything current, the stone worn smooth and mossy on the northern side, the stream below it running clear over flat rocks. It was the kind of place that had been significant once and had settled into attractive irrelevance, a good place to be when you didn't want to be seen. Naruto arrived 20 minutes before sunset and stood on the bridge and waited. The man who arrived from the north side did not look like the thing Naruto had built in his head from Hiruzen's careful description and Kakashi's less careful one. He looked, first, like a scientist, the particular quality of someone whose primary relationship with the world was through the act of examining it, the stillness of a person more comfortable observing than participating. He was tall, pale, with long dark hair and eyes that were gold yellow and moved across Naruto with the speed and thoroughness of someone reading a document they'd been waiting a long time to receive. He stopped at the far end of the bridge and looked at Naruto and didn't say anything for a moment. Naruto looked back. The Wolf Blood's assessment was immediate and precise, dangerous, controlled, carrying significant power at a low idol, not currently intending hostility. Also, genuinely curious. The scent of genuine curiosity was distinct from performed curiosity, it had a specific chemical quality, something open rather than calculating, and Orochimaru smelled of it the way a laboratory smelled of whatever it was built to study. "You're smaller than I expected," Orochimaru said. "You're more nervous than I expected," Naruto said. A pause. Something moved in Orochimaru's golden eyes, surprise, quickly housed. "That's an interesting read. You've been studying me for 8 months, Naruto said. Put out a bounty. Had people watching. And then you came yourself. Alone. To a bridge." He tilted his head slightly, the Wolf Blood's gesture, the predator's attentive angle. "People who aren't nervous don't need to come themselves." Orochimaru looked at him with the full attention of someone who has just recalibrated an assessment. He came to the center of the bridge and stopped, 10 feet away, and studied Naruto the way Naruto was studying him, with absolute thoroughness and no attempt to disguise the process. "How old are you?" Orochimaru said. 7. "And you can read emotional signatures from scent?" "Yes." "The wolf blood?" "Mostly. Some of it's practice." Naruto kept his eyes on the man's face. What answers do you have that the Hokage doesn't? Orochimaru smiled. It was a genuine smile, which was somehow less reassuring than a fake one would have been. Your mother knew what she was, he said. Not fully, she didn't have a name for it, and the transformation never manifested in her, the blood was too diluted, but she knew she was something different. She told Minato. Minato told Sarutobi. He paused. And Sarutobi told both of them that it was a natural Uzumaki trait, an unusual expression of their known vitality, nothing to investigate further. Naruto was still. I was the one who told Sarutobi what it actually was, Orochimaru said. I researched the Uzumaki origin texts, the ones that weren't in the Konoha archive, the ones that Uzushio didn't let out, and I brought my findings to him 11 years ago. I told him what the Uzumaki Pact was. What it could produce. His golden eyes were level, unhurried. He thanked me for the information and told me the village didn't need to pursue bloodline experimentation and that the Uzumaki individuals involved were handling their circumstances without intervention. The stream moved below them. The last of the sunset was going orange at the western tree line. You're saying he knew, Naruto said. I'm saying he had information and made a choice about how to use it. Orochimaru's voice carried no particular judgment, which made it worse. Whether that was protection or negligence depends on how you feel about outcomes. Naruto thought about Hiruzen's tired eyes and his careful voice and the apology he delivered with the specific honesty of someone who had decided to be honest too late. He thought about I made choices that I told myself were the best available. Why are you telling me this, he said. Because you should know the shape of the world you're standing in, Orochimaru said. Everyone around you has an interest in what you become. Sarutobi wants stability, he wants you to be a powerful tool for the village that doesn't destabilize anything else. Jiraiya wants you to be Minato's son, he wants the inheritance story, the worthy continuation. The council wants an asset. He paused. I want to understand what you actually are. The whole thing. Unfiltered and unmanaged. That's what you said to yourself, Naruto said. What do you want from me? Another pause. Longer. To show you something, Orochimaru said. 3 days north. Ruins of an old Uzushio outpost. I found the complete original texts of the Uzumaki Wolf Pact there. Not fragments. The whole thing. He watched Naruto's face. It describes what the full inheritance does. Not just the transformation. What it builds toward. What it becomes. The stream ran over its rocks. 50 meters back, at the tree line, Naruto could hear 2 heartbeats that were controlled and steady and waiting. Why didn't you just give it to the Hokage? Naruto said. I did, Orochimaru said. He thanked me and put it in a sealed archive. It's been there for 7 years. Naruto looked at him for a long time. The wolf blood ran its assessment again, still no hostility, still genuine, still that open chemical quality of real curiosity. Also something underneath all of that, layered and old, that smelled like ambition and like the particular desperation of a brilliant person who has decided that the one thing they cannot accept is the thing they cannot change, and has been running from that decision for a long time. You want to be able to live forever, Naruto said. Orochimaru was very still. That's underneath everything else you want, Naruto said. It's the first thing about you. You're afraid of dying and everything else is built on top of that fear. He said it without cruelty, without the social awareness to soften it or the political sense to withhold it. The wolf blood had no vocabulary for comfortable untruths, and Naruto had always been bad at pretending not to see things. The pact. The bloodline research. You think there's something in the old texts about how the first wolf relationship with mortality works. The silence was very specific. Then Orochimaru said, quietly, yes. And you thought I'd, Naruto stopped. Reran the logic. You thought I'd trade information. What you know about the pact, what you found in the texts, for whatever I could tell you about what it feels like from the inside. Something like that. Okay, Naruto said. Orochimaru blinked. Okay. I'll tell you what it feels like from the inside, Naruto said. But you have to tell me everything you found in the texts. Everything. Not edited for what you think I should know. Orochimaru looked at him with those gold eyes that had been looking at extraordinary things for 60 years and had not often been surprised by them. You're not afraid of me, he said. No. You should be. I have a specific interest in your bloodline. My interests have historically been, I know what your interests have historically been, Naruto said. I can also end you before you finish a hand seal and we both know it, so the fear question doesn't really apply. He said it the way you'd note weather. You're interesting to me. You know things I want to know. That's the only math that matters right now. The last of the sunset went out. Orochimaru stood on the bridge in the growing dark and looked at this 7-year-old child with the oldest blood in the world who had just declined to be afraid of him and had also, in the same breath, described him more accurately than most people managed in a lifetime of observation, and he felt something he had not felt in a considerable time. He felt met. The texts are in my research base, Orochimaru said. I can bring copies. Here, same time, 3 days, Naruto said. Bring all of it. He turned and walked back the way he'd come, toward the tree line and the 2 heartbeats that had been steady and were now, he noted with the wolf blood's precise red, significantly less steady, and he walked through the dark with the easy unhurried pace of something that owned the night and had always known it. Jiraiya had a lot to say. Most of it came out in the first 10 minutes, which was the alarm and the history and the very detailed account of what Orochimaru had done with knowledge in the past and what Orochimaru's interest in bloodlines had produced on at least 4 documented occasions. Naruto listened to all of it, sitting on a log in the forest dark, letting Jiraiya work through it because he'd earned the right to work through it and because some of what he was saying was genuinely useful information even wrapped in the emotion it was wrapped in. Kakashi sat on a branch above them and said nothing, which was his own form of contribution. When Jiraiya ran down, Naruto said, he told me about the archive. Jiraiya stopped. He said he gave Hiruzen the complete packed texts 7 years ago. That they're in a sealed archive. The forest was quiet. An owl somewhere to the east. The stream sound carrying faintly. Did he? Jiraiya said. His voice had gone very flat. I want to see those files, Naruto said. Naruto, I want to see them. Not because I don't trust what Orochimaru says. Because I want to read the original text myself. He looked at Jiraiya in the dark. This is about what I am. I should have access to that. Jiraiya ran a hand through his white hair. Hiruzen may have had reasons, he had reasons for everything, Naruto said. Some of them were even good. That doesn't mean I don't get to read the documents. He stood up. Will you ask him for them or should I? A pause. Then Kakashi's voice from the branch above, I'll ask him. Naruto looked up. Kakashi was looking down with the visible eye that carried what Naruto had learned to read as his version of approval, which wasn't warm exactly but was real. You're right that you should have access. Let me have the conversation. A pause. He respects me when I'm direct about things that matter. I'll be direct. Thank you, Naruto said. Don't thank me yet. He might argue. He'll give them up, Naruto said. Why? Because he already feels guilty about it and the guilt is sitting in him like a stone and the only way he can put it down is by doing the right thing. He said it simply. He's a good man who's made bad choices. Good men do the right thing when it's clearly in front of them. That's what makes the bad choices hard to understand. The owl called again, further east now, moving away. Jiraiya said nothing for a long time. Then, very quietly, to nobody in particular, Minato never analyzed people like that. I know, Naruto said. Kakashi says it comes from Mom. The archive files were on Naruto's table in the barracks 2 days later. Kakashi had been direct. Hiruzen had been quiet for a long time and then asked for an hour and then had Hawk deliver the files, unsealed, with no message attached, no explanation, no justification, no apology. Just the files. Which was, Naruto thought, the right call. He read them over 2 days. The Uzumaki Wolf Pact was older than the shinobi system by a margin that the text referred to as, before the counting of years, which was not a unit of time but communicated something about scale. The pact was not a summoning contract. Summoning contracts were a later human invention that had borrowed the structure of something much more fundamental. The pact was a covenant. The Uzumaki bloodline and the first wolf, in the beginning time, had made an agreement about coexistence. The wolf would run in their blood, dormant in most, active in a few, fully present in rare cases. In exchange, the bloodline would carry the wolf's memory, not consciously, not as a burden, but as a kind of living preservation, the way stories carried the people in them forward through time. The full inheritance, Naruto's case, was described in language that was partly ritualistic and partly technical in an ancient way that predated the technical vocabulary he knew. But the core of it was clear: the full inheritor carried the complete pact, all the power, all the memory, the full coexistence. They were not a wolf wearing a human skin. They were not a human who became a wolf. They were the point where the covenant made itself complete, the wolf's full presence in the world through a human consciousness, and the human's full presence in the wolf's ancient continuity. Both. Always both. Neither diminished by the other. He read that 3 times. There was also a section at the end of the oldest document, written in a different hand than the rest, later edition, he thought, or a different author working with the same materials. It described what the complete pact inheritor built toward over time, as the integration deepened. It used the word ascension, and it used it specifically enough to chill him, not with fear but with the specific sobriety of someone reading a map and understanding for the first time how large the territory was. He set the files down and sat with that for a while. Then he went and found the wolf blood in himself, easy now, like finding a heartbeat, just attending to it, and asked, not in words but in the way he was learning to communicate downward, toward the oldest layer of himself, is this true? The first wolf answered not in words but in the simple, ancient way of a thing that had always been patient with the question, yes. What does it mean? And the answer this time was the closest thing to language the first wolf used with him, for words that sat in his chest like 4 stones dropped into still water, each one spreading its own rings: you are not finished. Orochimaru came back to the bridge 3 nights later with a satchel of copied documents and the specific stillness of a man who has decided to do something and is carrying the decision carefully, not wanting to jostle it. Naruto was already there. They sat on the bridge railing on opposite sides, Orochimaru with the documents between them, Naruto with his legs swinging, and they talked for 3 hours. Not negotiating. Not performing. Just talking, the way 2 people talked when they were both more interested in the subject than in each other and had enough respect for the subject to be direct. Orochimaru showed him the texts, different versions from different Uzushio sources, some overlapping with what was in the Konoha archive, some not. The additional material was mostly technical: the mechanics of the transformation cycle, the development of the pact over generations, several case studies of previous full inheritance cases from centuries past that Naruto read with the focused attention of a person reading their own medical history. In exchange, Naruto described the transformation from the inside. The frequency, the tide metaphor, the way the first wolf's presence felt like the deepest layer of his own consciousness rather than an overlay. Orochimaru listened with the total, unperformative attention of a scientist receiving primary source data on something he'd been trying to theorize from the outside, and asked questions that were precise and technical and occasionally extraordinary in their insight. The mortality question, Naruto said, near the end of the 2nd hour. Orochimaru went still. The wolf's relationship with mortality, Naruto said. The pact texts I read said the full inheritor doesn't age the way humans age. The old documents called it living in the long time. What does your research say about that? Orochimaru's golden eyes were very careful. It says the full inheritor's lifespan is functionally indeterminate by human metrics. The Uzumaki longevity you're aware of is a fragment of this, the wolf blood slows the biological clock in the packed bloodline, and in the full inheritor, the slowing is complete enough to be, he stopped. Permanent, Naruto said. In the literature's terms, yes. The pact treats the full inheritor as a manifestation of something that does not have an end point, and the biology follows the pact. Naruto looked at the stream. The moonlight on the water, the way it moved. And you want to know how that works? Because you want it for yourself. Yes, Orochimaru said. No hesitation, this time. The directness of a person who has been met honestly and is returning the meeting. I don't know yet, Naruto said. I'm not finished. I won't know for a long time. He looked at Orochimaru. But I can tell you this, for free, because it's true and because you should hear it, the longevity isn't separate from what I am. It's not a mechanism you can extract and transfer. It's part of the whole covenant. The pact keeps me alive because the pact needs me alive, because I'm its complete expression in the world. He paused. You can't take that out of the thing it belongs to. It's not portable. Orochimaru looked at him for a long time. You're certain. As certain as I can be about something I'm still in the middle of. The silence held. That's not what I wanted to hear, Orochimaru said finally. I know, Naruto said. But you wanted the truth from the inside. That's the truth from the inside. Orochimaru looked at the stream. For a moment, only a moment, the gold eyes were something less armored than usual, the scientist's composure peeled back enough to show the thing underneath it, which was old and afraid and brilliant and had been running from its own fear for long enough to have built a whole life of alternative motivations around it. It's not portable, he said quietly. Not asking. Just holding the words. No, Naruto said. But you already knew. You came here knowing. I think you came here wanting someone to say it directly so you could stop chasing it. The owl somewhere in the trees. The stream over its rocks. You're 7 years old, Orochimaru said. You keep saying that, Naruto said. A pause. And then, and this was the thing, the genuinely unexpected thing, Orochimaru laughed. It was short and sharp and real, the surprised laugh of someone who didn't laugh often and wasn't prepared for the impulse, and it changed his face completely for the 3 seconds it lasted. Then he was composed again. But something had shifted in the air of the bridge, some fundamental quality of the conversation settling into a different register. I'll send you the remaining documents, Orochimaru said. The ones I haven't copied yet. There are a few texts that discuss what the old Uzushio scholars called the second threshold, the next stage of integration beyond the initial transformation. I found the word ascension in the Konoha texts, Naruto said. Then you've seen the signpost. The texts I have describe what's past it. He gathered his satchel. Stood. I'm not your ally, he said, clearly. I want you to know that. I have my own projects, my own direction. This, he gestured at the bridge, the conversation, the 3 hours of honest exchange. This is a transaction. An interesting one, but a transaction. I know, Naruto said. And you're fine with that. I'm not looking for allies, Naruto said. I'm looking for information. You have some. We've been useful to each other. He looked at Orochimaru steadily. What you do with what you know about me is your business. But I'll tell you straight, if I find out you've moved on the village or on anyone I care about, the bounty conversation is over. Orochimaru studied him. Most people phrase that as a threat. It's not a threat, Naruto said. It's information. Like you prefer. A pause. Then Orochimaru inclined his head, not a bow, not submission, but the gesture of one intelligent entity acknowledging another. He moved toward the bridge's end, and paused once. Kushina would have been extraordinary, he said, without turning. If the inheritance had manifested in her instead. A pause. She was extraordinary anyway. You should know that. He was gone before Naruto answered. Naruto sat on the bridge railing in the dark and listened to the stream and the night and the distant paired heartbeats of Jiraiya and Kakashi at the tree line, and thought about second thresholds and long time and the stone in Hiruzen's chest and a woman he'd never met who had carried old blood and old power and given both of them to her son along with whatever else she'd had to give. I know, he said, to no one, or to the oldest part of himself, or to the night air that moved through Konoha and through the forest and had been moving through the world since before the naming of things. I know she was. Chapter 5, Blood and Old Gods. Wind country in the deep summer smelled like baked stone and dry grass and the particular mineral edge of air that had been heated and cooled and heated again over desert sand until it carried the memory of the process in every particle. Naruto noticed this from 50 miles out, the scent signature of an entire geography arriving before the geography itself, the wolf blood turning the world into information the way it always did now, constant, effortless, the sensory landscape of every place he moved through as vivid and detailed as a map drawn by someone who had been there 1,000 times. He hadn't been here once. He was 8 now. 1 year past the night the moon bled, old enough to have put some distance between himself and the event without losing what it had given him, which was the complete and absolute knowledge of what he was. The Konoha reconstruction was mostly finished. The bounty on him had gone up to 70 million ryo, which Jiraiya had noted in his research journal and Kakashi had noted with his visible eye in the specific way that communicated professional concern without stating it. Naruto had noted it the way you noted weather. Interesting. Relevant. Not a problem until it was a problem. The mission that had brought him south was not technically a mission, he wasn't registered as a shinobi, he was 8 years old. The academy registration was ongoing and increasingly theoretical given that the academy's curriculum had essentially nothing left to offer him in practical terms. What it was a request from Hiruzen, delivered in the careful measured tone that Naruto had learned to parse as I cannot order this but I am hoping you will agree. There was a situation in Wind Country. Specifically, in Suna. Specifically, involving the one-tailed Jinchuriki, who had 3 months ago stopped being a person in any functional sense and had started being a containment problem, and whose containment was now threatening to become a regional incident. The Kazekage had sent a formal request for consultation, not for help. The formal language was very deliberate about that. No one in Suna was going to officially request help for something this close to their own failure, but for the assessment of someone who had, as the diplomatic wording put it, demonstrated capacity for coexistence with significant sealed entities. Jiraiya had read that twice, made a sound that was equal parts amusement and concern, and said, "They mean you." "I know they mean me." "You're 8. "They know that too," Naruto said. "They asked anyway." Jiraiya had argued for another hour. The argument had the shape of all his arguments, genuinely considered, structurally sound, made from a place of real concern, and had reached the same destination as all his arguments, which was Naruto listening carefully, extracting what was useful, and going anyway. Kakashi had simply packed. They traveled south together, the 3 of them, the specific traveling configuration they developed over the past year, Jiraiya taking the roads because he liked roads and people and the intelligence that road travel generated, Kakashi moving parallel through the terrain because that was how he was built, and Naruto moving however he felt like moving on a given day, which was sometimes the road and sometimes the open run through the landscape in the wolf form, covering the ground at a speed. That meant he arrived places well ahead of them and waited. He was waiting at the outskirts of Suna when they caught up. The city was impressive in the specific way that things built by very tough people in very difficult environments were impressive, not beautiful, not ornate, but real, the deep realness of architecture that had been built to survive what the desert did to things. The walls were high and the gates were heavy and the sand had gotten into everything and the whole place smelled of heated stone and baked clay and, underneath both of those, the sharp mineral trace of fear. Not individual fear. Collective. The slow-release chemical signature of a city that had been living with something for a long time and had passed the threshold where fear was an event and reached the place where it was just the ambient air. The Shikaku's situation is worse than the briefing said, Naruto told Jiraiya when he arrived. Jiraiya looked at the city. How do you know? Smell. Naruto looked at the gates. They're afraid of someone inside those walls the way prey is afraid of a predator. Not the way people are afraid of an external threat. He paused. It's coming from the direction of what I assume is the Kazekage's compound. Jiraiya and Kakashi exchanged a look over his head. The kid, Kakashi said. The kid, Jiraiya agreed. The Kazekage received them in a room with too many guards and not enough windows, which told Naruto several things about the man's current psychological state before he'd spoken a word. He was a tall, lean person with the contained quality of someone who had been making hard decisions for a long time and had made one recently that he wasn't at peace with. His chakra, at Naruto's peripheral read, was controlled and significant and currently carrying the particular signature of guilt. He looked at Naruto with the expression adults wore when they'd known intellectually that something was young and found themselves unprepared for the reality of it. You're the wolf child, the Kazekage said. Naruto said. You're asking me here about your Jinchuriki. The Kazekage's jaw tightened slightly. My son, he said. His name is Gaara. Naruto looked at him. The guilt smell got stronger. How old is he? 6. The room was quiet. Jiraiya and Kakashi were behind Naruto, positioned correctly for the formal meeting they'd been told this was. The guards were positioned correctly for something they weren't sure was a formal meeting. What did you do to him? Naruto said. The Kazekage stood up from behind his desk with the specific movement of a man who has been still for too long and has been given a reason to move that he doesn't entirely welcome. The seal was modified, he said. By someone I trusted. To increase Suna's military capacity. The Shikaku's influence on my son's mental state has been, he stopped. Escalating. Escalating how? He hasn't slept in 4 months, the Kazekage said. If he sleeps, the Shikaku takes full control. He's been isolated from human contact because the sand responds to his emotions and the sand has killed. He stopped again. Something in his face was very still in the way that things were still when they were holding weight they couldn't set down. 3 people. Accidents. Sand-based, completely involuntary. You isolated a 6-year-old who accidentally hurt people, Naruto said. And you're calling it containment. I'm calling it, you isolated him and now he's more dangerous because the isolation made the Shikaku's influence stronger because there was nothing else for him to hold on to, Naruto said. That's not containment. That's a feedback loop. The Kazekage looked at him with an expression that was several things simultaneously, none of them simple. You're 8 years old, he said. Gaara is 6, Naruto said. I'm asking to see him. They kept Gaara in a room near the base of the Kazekage Tower that was designed as living quarters but had been systematically modified towards something that was closer to a holding cell without anyone having made that decision explicitly. The walls had sand blast marks at various heights. The furniture that remained was bolted to the floor. The window had been removed and filled with stone. The guard outside the door, a single jonin, carrying himself with the professional composure of someone who had made his peace with a very uncomfortable assignment, looked at the small group Naruto had brought with him, which was just himself, and said, I was told 3 of you. I'm going in alone, Naruto said. That's not safe. Naruto tilted his head. For who? The jonin looked at him. Stepped aside. The room was dark. Naruto didn't need light. The wolf blood gave him a sensory picture of the space before he'd fully crossed the threshold, the whole room mapped in pressure and heat and scent, and the scent hit him first and hardest. Gaara of the Sand was sitting in the far corner with his knees pulled to his chest and his arms wrapped around them, and he smelled of sand and sleeplessness and the specific corrosive combination of fear and rage that came from someone who had been both, simultaneously, for so long that the 2 emotions had merged into a single state without a name. His teal eyes, when they opened and found Naruto in the doorway, were rimmed red and carrying the flat metallic quality of someone who had forgotten what sleep felt like. Around him, the sand moved. Not dramatically. Not threateningly, or not intentionally. It moved the way breathing moved, automatic and continuous, a constant low-level expression of the Shikaku's presence in the boy, sand drifting across the floor in slow currents, lifting and settling in patterns that tracked Gaara's heartbeat. Naruto stepped into the room. The sand responded immediately, a sharp upward surge, a wall of it between Gaara and the door, dense and fast and entirely purposeful. Naruto walked into it. The sand hit him. Not dramatically either, from the outside. It wasn't a projectile, wasn't aimed, it was a barrier encountering something that was moving toward it and discovering that the something was not stopping. The Shikaku's sand was powerful. Sand-based defense was Suna's signature, the pride of their military tradition, the Kekkei Genkai of the Kazekage line, and Gaara's expression of it was, by every account Naruto had read, the strongest iteration in recorded history. The wolf blood simply did not recognize it as an obstacle. Not because it was stronger than the sand in some calculable sense, the interaction was more fundamental than that. The sand was physical force. The wolf blood was something older than the physical in the way that the thing which defined a container was older than whatever was in the container. The sand touched him and found nothing to act against, the way the binding seals had dissolved 3 months ago against nothing. He walked through the sand barrier and crouched down in front of Gaara. The sand fell. Gaara was staring at him. His eyes were very wide. In them, behind the red-rimmed exhaustion and the flat metallic fear, was something Naruto recognized because he'd felt it himself, once, the look of someone who had been completely alone for so long that the arrival of another person in the specific space of their aloneness was more disorienting than anything threatening could have been. "Hi," Naruto said. Gaara said nothing. "I'm Naruto." He sat fully on the floor, cross-legged, putting himself at Gaara's eye level. "I heard you haven't slept." Gaara's jaw was tight. "If I sleep, he takes over." "Shikaku." "Yes." "Have you ever talked to him?" Naruto said. Something moved in Gaara's face, a flash of something that was almost indignation. "He talks to me all the time. He tells me," he stopped. His hands tightened around his knees. "He says I exist to kill. What do you think?" Naruto said. Gaara looked at him. The sand was moving again, slower now, the small drifting currents. "What I think doesn't matter. Everyone agrees with him. Everyone is afraid of me." "I'm not afraid of you," Naruto said. "You should be." "Probably," Naruto agreed easily. "Are you afraid of me?" A pause. Gaara looked at him properly for the first time, really looked, the teal eyes moving across his face with the careful attention of someone who had been watching the world from a distance for so long that proximity was an exercise requiring concentration. "No," he said slowly. "I don't know why. Because I'm not food and I'm not a threat and I'm not trying to manage you," Naruto said. "There's nothing to be afraid of in that. Everyone is trying to manage me. I know." Naruto looked at the sand-marked walls, the removed window, the bolted furniture. "They built you a cage and called it protection. Mine was smaller but I know what that looks like from the inside." Gaara's eyes narrowed. "Not hostile, searching. You have a tail beast." "9 tails, yeah. Also something else." Naruto paused. "You felt the wolf blood when I walked through the sand." The sand stopped, Gaara said, like this was the most significant thing that had happened to him in recent memory, which it might have been. "The sand doesn't stop. It doesn't know what to do with me," Naruto said. "The wolf blood is older than the chakra system. Older than tailed beasts. The sand's chakra-based, it looks for something to push against and the wolf blood isn't in that register." Gaara absorbed this. "What is the wolf blood?" "Part of me," Naruto said. "Just like the sand is part of you. Not a passenger. Not an enemy. Part of you." He watched the sand drift. "Shikaku is not the same thing. He's sealed inside you. But the sand, your sand, that came from you first, didn't it? Before the seal, before Shikaku, there was something in you that could do that." The silence stretched. Mother gave it to me, Gaara said. So quietly it was barely sound. That's what they told me. My mother died when I was born and she put her love into the sand to protect me. He said it the way a child said things they had been told so many times they'd stopped being able to hear them. I don't know if that's true. It sounds true, Naruto said. It sounds exactly like what a mother would do. Gaara looked at him sharply. My mother did something like it, Naruto said. Put herself into the thing that was protecting me. Used what she had. He paused. The sand that moves when you're afraid or angry, the automatic sand, the protective kind, that's your mother. Shikaku is the thing your father put on top of that. The room was very still. The sand had stopped moving. Gaara was looking at him with an expression that was completely unguarded in the specific way of someone who has not had to guard themselves recently because there has been nothing close enough to guard against. Raw and young and carrying 6 years of the particular damage that came from being handled as a problem rather than a person. Why are you telling me this? Gaara said. Because you should know what you actually are, Naruto said. Before anyone else gets to decide. He was in the room for 2 hours. When he came out, the Jonin guard looked at him with the expression of a man who had been listening to silence and was working out what the silence meant. Jiraiya and Kakashi were further down the corridor, and Jiraiya was doing the thing he did when he was anxious, which was reviewing his notes without reading them. Well? Jiraiya said. He needs sleep, Naruto said. The Shikaku problem is real but it's secondary. The primary problem is that 6-year-olds need sleep and human contact and something to hold on to that isn't a tailed beast. He walked toward them. I'm going to go back tomorrow. And the day after. Naruto, we can't, I'm not going back to Konoha yet, Naruto said. I'll tell you when I'm done here. Jiraiya opened his mouth, looked at him, closed it. He was getting better at the specific negotiation between his protective instincts and the reality of what Naruto was, and today it resolved faster than it used to. Fine, he said. I'll be at the inn. I know, Naruto said. I can hear you from here. The second day, he taught Gaara what Jiraiya had taught him, not about the wolf blood, which was specific to Naruto, but about consciousness and coexistence. About finding the frequency. About the distinction between the power that lived in you and the power that was sealed into you, and how attending to one could change your relationship with the other. Gaara was quiet through most of it. Listened with the complete absorption of someone who had been waiting for a specific piece of information and was now receiving it. You're saying I can talk to him, Gaara said. Shikaku. Like you talk to the Nine-Tails. You can try, Naruto said. He won't be friendly. Kurama wasn't friendly for a long time. He paused. But friendly isn't the point. Understanding is. If you understand what Shikaku actually wants, not what he tells you he wants, what he actually wants underneath that, you can start to find the places where what he wants and what you want aren't completely different. What does he want? Ask him, Naruto said. Tonight. When you feel him trying to take over, instead of fighting it, ask him. That will give him an opening. You have silver eyes watching, Naruto said. He met Gaara's teal ones. I'll be outside the door. If it goes wrong I'll come in. Gaara looked at him for a long moment. You mean that? I'm still here, Naruto said simply. He spent the night outside Gaara's door. Not sleeping, the wolf blood made his sleep requirements considerably different from human norms, 2 or 3 hours, taken in the way predators took rest, light and ready. He sat in the corridor and listened to the room and tracked the chakra signatures, Gaara's, distinct and complex, the sand-heavy quality of it, and beneath it the massive grinding presence of Shikaku, big and ancient and not at all friendly. He heard Gaara's voice once, very low, speaking inward. Asking. And then silence for a long time. And then, just before dawn, something changed in the chakra signature, a settling, a brief and fragile drop in the background tension, the way water went still when wind stopped. Gaara slept. For 3 hours, 4, the first sleep in 4 months, real sleep, the kind that actually restored something. The sand stilled completely. When he woke, he opened the door himself and found Naruto in the corridor and looked at him with teal eyes that were slightly less red at the edges, carrying something he hadn't carried yesterday. He wants to be real, Gaara said. Shikaku. He wants to be more than a weapon. He's angry because nobody treats him like he's real. He stopped. That's what he actually wants. Yeah, Naruto said. That's usually what it is. They looked at each other in the corridor, two children in a building full of adults who had been making large decisions about them, and the morning light was coming through a window at the end of the hall, the specific pale gold of Suna mornings. Come back, Gaara said. It was not a request exactly. It was not quite a demand. It was the statement of someone who had found something rare and was naming the specific shape of what they wanted to happen next. I'll come back, Naruto said. I promise. It was the first promise Naruto had made that wasn't in some form or another about what he was capable of. The Kazekage requested a formal meeting before they left. Naruto sat across from the man and listened to the careful diplomatic language about outcomes and regional cooperation and the potential for further consultation, and when the Kazekage finished Naruto said, "Stop isolating him." The Kazekage was quiet. Human contact. Real contact, not supervision. He needs his siblings near him and he needs to go outside and he needs to be treated like a person who is learning something difficult instead of a problem that has to be managed. He held the man's eyes. The Shikaku's influence gets stronger in isolation. You've known this and you've kept doing it anyway because the alternative is harder and scarier. The alternative poses a risk too, everything poses a risk, Naruto said. That's not the question. The question is whether the risk of letting your son be a person is bigger than the risk of not letting him. He stood. You already know the answer. You've known it for a while. I think that's most of why you called us here. The Kazekage looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at the window. Then he said, quietly, he asked about you. This morning. Asked if you would come back. I said I would, Naruto said. Why? Naruto considered the question. Because he's 6 and nobody's treated him like he matters since his mother died and the wolf blood told me when I walked in that room that there was nothing wrong with him that couldn't be fixed by someone staying. He left the Kazekage sitting in his room of too many guards and not enough windows, and the look on the man's face as Naruto went, not the dignity of office, not the calculation of politics, but the raw specific look of a father who has been told something he already knew and is finally, past the cost of hearing it, beginning to move toward it. 3 weeks after they returned to Konoha, Danzo moved. Not against Naruto directly. Danzo was too intelligent for direct, and his moves were never the thing you were watching, they were the thing happening in the space your attention had been redirected away from. What happened was a root operative intercepted one of Orochimaru's document deliveries, the remaining Uzushio texts that Orochimaru had promised, traveling through a Konoha-adjacent courier route. And the interception was clean and left no fingerprints and would have remained invisible except that Naruto's sensory range had expanded over the past year to a degree that meant nothing approached the village along major routes without his awareness. He smelled the root operative before the man had finished the interception. He also smelled the documents. Specific paper, specific ink, Orochimaru's particular preservation method for ancient materials. He'd learned these in 3 nights on a stone bridge and the wolf blood did not forget scent signatures, ever. He moved. Not through the village. Over it, rooftops, the specific long stride pace of the wolf blood applied to human form, which was considerably faster than a run. The root operative was 3 blocks from the eastern gate when Naruto landed in front of him. The operative stopped. He was in full root gear, maskless, which was the post-Hiruzen protocol change, Danzo having been told in very direct terms that masked ANBU not in the official chain of command was a political problem. He was skilled. Naruto could feel the skill in the quality of his stillness, the absence of wasted movement. Those belong to me, Naruto said, looking at the documents under the man's arm. These are being reviewed for village security concerns. Danzo sent you, Naruto said. A pause. I'm an official ANBU operative Ana, you're a root operative and Danzo sent you and we both know it, Naruto said. I can smell the lie and I can smell who gave you your orders. So we can skip the part where you read me the official version. He held out his hand. The documents. The operative was very still. Assessing. Naruto watched the calculation happen. The man was genuinely skilled, had every technical advantage of training and experience and physical development over an 8-year-old, and he was also, Naruto's wolf blood noted, arriving at the correct conclusion about whether those advantages were relevant in this specific situation. The documents landed in Naruto's hand. The operative stepped back, turned, and walked away at a pace that was professionally controlled and not quite fast enough to be a retreat, because calling it a retreat would require calling it something, and calling it something would require putting it in a report, and putting it in a report would require explaining it. Naruto looked at the documents. Undamaged. He checked by smell, Orochimaru's preservation method intact, the paper in the same condition it had left wherever it had come from. He turned and walked back through the village. Danzo was in Hiruzen's office 2 hours later. Naruto knew because he was in the hallway outside the office, not hiding, just standing in the hallway with the documents under his arm, audible to anyone in the office who had functioning ears and to anyone in the hallway who could read a situation. The conversation inside was not a loud one. Danzo never did loud. But the specific quality of the silence between statements was extensive, and what came through the wall was the texture of two men who had known each other for decades having an argument that was also a renegotiation of terms. Naruto didn't listen to the content. The content was politics and he understood politics well enough to know that its resolutions were temporary and its underlying dynamics were not, which meant listening to it in detail was less useful than understanding its structure, which he already did. He listened instead to the heartbeats. Hiruzen's, steady, controlled, with the specific undertow of a man who was tired and right and winning an argument he shouldn't have needed to have. Danzo's, flatter, more deliberate, the heartbeat of someone who managed their physiology as a professional discipline and did it very well and was doing it particularly carefully right now. And underneath Danzo's heartbeat, because the wolf blood did not just read the surface and could not be fooled by controlled physiology because it went below physiology to something more fundamental, cold frustration. Old ambition. The specific combination of a person who loves the thing they want to control and cannot separate the love from the control and has been living in that paradox for so long they've stopped seeing it as a paradox. He loved Konoha, Naruto realized. Danzo loved the village the way you loved something you thought needed you to be sharp-edged and relentless to protect it, and the sharpness and relentlessness had become the thing, and the thing underneath it, the love, was still there but couldn't be reached without moving through everything built on top of it. It didn't make him safe. It made him considerably more complicated. The door opened. Danzo came out and stopped when he found Naruto in the hallway, and the two of them looked at each other for a moment, the old general and the 8-year-old with the ancient blood, and the quality of the looking was very specific. Not hostile. Not quite mutual assessment. Something that was closer to recognition, two things acknowledging that they understood each other clearly and that the clarity changed nothing about where they stood. The documents, Danzo said. Mine, Naruto said. They're from Orochimaru. Orochimaru is, complicated, Naruto said. I know. I'm handling it. You're 8. You keep saying that like it's an argument. Danzo was quiet for a beat that had a lot of thought in it. Then, the third trusts you. Some, Naruto said. That trust puts you in a position that could be used against him. I know. And you're not concerned about that. Naruto looked at him steadily. I'm not going to be managed, he said. By you, by Orochimaru, by the third, by anyone. If I make a choice that goes wrong, it's my choice that went wrong. That's what it means to be responsible for yourself. He tilted his head slightly. You've been making choices for Konoha your whole life under the same principle. Just applied to a whole village instead of one person. Danzo looked at him with those old, specific eyes. The difference, he said slowly, is that I've been doing it for 50 years and I know the cost. Then you know the alternative is worse, Naruto said. Another beat. Longer. Then Danzo moved past him, his footsteps deliberate and even on the stone floor, and didn't look back, and Naruto watched him go and thought about love and control and the things you built to protect something that got so tall and dense that the thing underneath stopped getting light. He went into Hiruzen's office. The old man was at his desk with his hands flat on the surface and the expression of someone who had just finished a difficult thing and was sitting with the finish of it. He looked up when Naruto came in. I heard the hallway conversation, Hiruzen said. I know you did. You handled it well. Naruto set the documents on the desk. He's going to keep moving against me, he said. Not stupidly. Not directly. But he's going to keep trying to put himself in between me and whatever I am. Yes, Hiruzen said. Because I'm not controllable and he can't accept uncontrollable power in his village. Yes. What are you going to do about it? Hiruzen looked at the documents. Then at Naruto. I'm going to continue doing what I've been doing, which is watching carefully and intervening when necessary and hoping the balance holds. He paused. I'm not going to exile him or remove him. He serves the village in real ways. He just loves it too tightly, Naruto said. Hiruzen blinked. That's what it is, Naruto said. He loves it the way you hold something breakable, so tight you end up being the thing that breaks it. The old man looked at him for a long time. You got that from the hallway. And from the wolf blood, Naruto said. It's good at what things actually are underneath what they appear to be. That must be exhausting, Hiruzen said. Sometimes, Naruto said honestly. Mostly it's just information. He picked up the documents, tucked them under his arm, and left. That night, he read the remaining texts. The second threshold, what the old Uzushio scholars had called ascension, was described in language that was more philosophical than technical, the limitation of people trying to document something they had only theorized about without witnessing. But the structure of it was clear enough. The full inheritor, as the integration deepened over years, would begin to access not just the power of the first wolf but the memory. The accumulated experience of every wolf that had ever run under every moon since the first one, the entire lineage, an ocean of time and wildness and ancient knowing that was part of the Covenant's promise, the human carrying the wolf forward, and the wolf carrying the human backward through the deep time. He read that and sat with it and felt the wolf blood stir in response, the way it stirred when he attended to something true. Not yet, the first wolf said. Quiet as always now, settled, the rumble of something enormous at rest. I know, Naruto said. You're impatient. I'm 8. The first wolf was quiet for a moment. Then, in the specific way it sometimes communicated something that was close to warmth without quite being warmth, the way a very old thing communicated affection in the only register it had, which was long and slow and certain, you have time. Outside the window, the moon was 3 days from full. He could feel it already, the familiar pull, no longer a tide he braced against but a rhythm he moved with. The wolf blood sang back to it the way it always did now, not answering a summons but acknowledging a conversation between two things that had always known each other. He looked at the moon for a long time. In the distance, across the village, across the dark, the reconstruction was complete. Konoha stood whole and lit and breathing, and somewhere in it Hinata was asleep in her compound, and somewhere in it Kakashi was reading by lamplight, and somewhere in it Jiraiya was writing something down in his battered journal, and the whole village was alive and organized and specific, 5,300 heartbeats that Naruto knew the way he knew the northern forest, each one distinct, the entire living map of the place he had broken and that had been put back together and that was complicated and imperfect and irrevocably his home. He had been afraid, once, in the first weeks after the transformation, that the wolf blood would make him something separate from everything human. That the ancient power and the old time and the depth of what the first wolf was would pull him away from the specific small human world of academy rooftops and ramen stalls and a small girl with a leaf in her hair who asked if he was okay. It hadn't. It had made all of it sharper. More present. More specifically itself. The moon moved overhead. Naruto turned from the window, set the documents in their careful stack, and went to sleep, the light, ready sleep of something that owned the night and was not afraid of what morning brought. 3 days away, in a room in Suna that now had its window back, a 6-year-old boy with teal eyes and sand in his blood slept also, for the 4th night in a row, with a promise held against his chest like a stone that was warm instead of cold. And further away, in a place that smelled like old stone and preserved paper and the flat mineral patience of someone who had been studying the world for 60 years and was revising what they knew about it, a man with golden eyes looked at his own notes, struck a line through a theory he'd held for a decade, and wrote something new in the margin. Everything was moving. Toward what? The map was still being drawn. But it was moving. Chapter 6, The Moon Remembers Everything. The voice came for the first time in October. Not the first wolf's voice, that was familiar now, settled into the architecture of Naruto's inner life the way a river settled into a valley it had carved itself, present and natural and no longer remarkable. This was something else. Something that came from a direction the first wolf's voice didn't come from, which was to say it came from the depth below the depth, from the place in the old covenant that the second threshold texts had been pointing at without being able to describe directly. It came during a run. Full wolf form, the northern forest, a morning in October when the air had gone sharp and the leaves were turning and the whole landscape smelled of cold coming, and in the middle of the run, in the specific clarity of full wolf form movement, it arrived. Not words. Memory. He stumbled. First time he had stumbled in wolf form, which said something about what the memory was. He caught himself, stopped, stood in the forest with the impact of it still reverberating through his chest, and tried to locate what he'd just experienced. A plane. He had seen a plane, not with his eyes, not a vision, but from the inside, the full sensory memory of running across a plain under a moon that was impossibly large and close, the grass knee-high and silver-tipped, the world young in a way the current world was not, carrying the specific quality of places before the weight of human history had pressed down into the land. He had felt pause, not his hands in wolf form, different, older, the pause of something that had been running for the first time, the very first run, and the joy of it was so large and so clean that it sat in his chest now like a struck bell still ringing. Second threshold, the first wolf said. Quiet. Certain. Naruto stood in the October forest and breathed and felt the bell ring and ring and ring. That was yours, he said. That memory. Ours, the first wolf said. Now. He didn't tell Jiraiya immediately. Not because he was hiding it, he'd gotten past hiding things from Jiraiya around month 3, when he'd recognized that the man's anxiety about things he didn't know was considerably more disruptive than his anxiety about things he did, and that information management served neither of them. He didn't tell him because he needed 3 days to understand what was happening well enough to describe it, and describing things imprecisely to Jiraiya was counterproductive because Jiraiya would write down the imprecise version and the written version would calcify and become the version on record, and Naruto had learned to care about what went on record. The memories came every day after that. Not constantly, not the overwhelming flood he'd been afraid of in those first seconds of stumbling in the forest. Controlled, specific, arriving in the moments of full attentiveness the way information arrived when you were completely present, in the wolf form run, in the deepest part of full moon howl, in the particular stillness of early morning when the wolf blood was most settled and the channel between his consciousness and the ancient covenant was widest. Each memory was different. A hunt in a landscape that was not any current geography. A pack, which was the word but not quite the thing, something older and more complex than pack, the original social structure that pack was a later simplified version of. A winter that lasted longer than winters lasted now. And underneath all of them, the thread of the first wolf's presence as a continuous thing, not episodic, not bounded, the living of a creature that experienced time differently from the way humans experienced it, in which individual moments were not the primary unit but something larger, something seasonal, something that moved with the deep rhythms of the world rather than the counted rhythms of human days. He absorbed them and organized them, and they became part of him the way everything did, which was completely and without reservation, because the wolf blood had never learned the human technique of partial incorporation, of holding things at arm's length, of keeping experience at a managed distance. On the fourth day he went to Jiraiya. Jiraiya listened to the whole of it without interrupting, which was unusual, and told Naruto the man understood the weight of what he was hearing. When it was done, he sat in silence for long enough that it was almost uncomfortable, and then he said, "You're past the first threshold." Yes. The texts described this as something that took years. Decades, in the old case studies. The old cases didn't have the nine tails too, Naruto said. I think the chakra density accelerated something. Kurama's presence in the seal makes the overall energy environment. He stopped, looked for the word. Louder. More active. The second threshold came earlier because there was already so much happening at that layer. Jiraiya wrote something down. Scratched it out. Wrote it again. Kurama, he said, because Naruto had started using the name instead of the nine tails about 6 months ago, and Jiraiya had been cataloging the shift without commenting on it. You've been talking to him. More, Naruto said. He's been more present. Since the memories started. He paused. I think he's interested. Interested how? The wolf blood memories are older than him. Older than Bijou. He's been treating me as something that belongs in his shadow since the beginning, and now there's something in my head that he's in the shadow of. He said it plainly, without satisfaction. It's adjusting his understanding of the arrangement. Jiraiya looked at him. You're 8 years old. I'm aware. I say that, Jiraiya said, carefully, not as an observation about your competence. I know what you're capable of. I say it because I need you to know that I see both things simultaneously, what you are, which is extraordinary and ancient and well past anything I can track on a map, and who you are, which is a kid who ate 3 bowls of ramen last Tuesday and fell asleep during my notes review. He paused. Both things are real. Don't let the first one eat the second. Naruto looked at him. Something moved in his chest, not the wolf blood this time, something more specifically and simply human. I know, he said. I'm not losing the second one. Good. Jiraiya closed his journal. Because Minato was also extraordinary and also a person, and I spent too many years watching the extraordinary part and not enough watching the person, and I would like to not repeat that. The room was quiet for a moment. He told bad jokes, Naruto said. Jiraiya blinked. You told me that, the first night. I think about it sometimes. He looked at the window. I think about what it would be like if he was. I don't do that often. It doesn't help. He said it quickly, not with pain but with the precise practical awareness of someone who knows which lines of thinking are productive and which aren't. But I think about it sometimes. Yeah, Jiraiya said. His voice was rough for a second and then it wasn't. Me too. Kakashi brought the news in the second week of November, arriving at the barack in the early morning with the specific quality of stillness around him that he carried when he was containing something significant. Orochimaru moved on the Kazekage, he said. Naruto was already awake, already dressed, the wolf blood having registered Kakashi's approach and his heartbeats undertow 2 minutes before the knock. When? 3 days ago. We got the report this morning. Kakashi came in, sat on the edge of the cot. The Kazekage is dead. Orochimaru took his identity. He paused. He's using the disguise to maneuver troops. The preliminary read is that he's using the Chunin exams, they're being hosted in Konoha this year, scheduled for next month, as cover for a coordinated strike. On Konoha, Naruto said. On Konoha. And he's not alone, there are indicators of a secondary alliance, Sound Village, which is his current operational base, coordinated with elements of he stopped. Danzo's been approached. We don't know if he's accepted. The room was very quiet. Danzo, Naruto said. The contact was intercepted by Hiruzen's intelligence team. The full content isn't confirmed. Kakashi's visible eye was flat and careful. Hiruzen is handling it. He asked me to tell you because you have the right to know and because, he paused again. Because Orochimaru's target isn't just the village. It's me, Naruto said. The plan, as we understand it, involves using the invasion to destabilize the village to the point where whatever containment capacity exists around you is removed or neutralized. After which, Kakashi said, with the precise evenness of a man delivering information he finds personally and professionally unacceptable, Orochimaru intends to use the chaos to attempt a direct interaction with you. Naruto thought about the bridge. The 3 hours of honest conversation. The moment of genuine laughter. The way Orochimaru had said I am not your ally with the specific clarity of a man telling the truth. He'd told the truth. He hadn't said he wouldn't try. He doesn't want to fight me, Naruto said. He wants to study the second threshold. He told me the mortality answer wasn't portable, I told him it wasn't portable, but he thinks if he can be present when the ascension, he stopped. Reran Orochimaru's logic from the bridge, the architecture of a brilliant mind that had already known what it wanted when it arrived at the conversation and had been looking for the gap between what was true and what might still serve its purpose. He thinks if he can witness it directly, in real time, he can find the mechanism. That even if the covenant itself isn't portable, the biological process might be reverse-engineered. Kakashi was looking at him. He's wrong, Naruto said. But that won't stop him from trying. No, Kakashi said. It won't. Naruto stood up. How long until the Chunin exams? 3 weeks. Tell Hiruzen I want to be part of the response planning. He anticipated that. He asked me to bring you in this morning. Then let's go. The planning was not what Naruto expected, which was to say it was better than he expected. Hiruzen had assembled a small, specific group, himself, Kakashi, Jiraiya, 2 ANBU commanders whose loyalty was unambiguous, and the head of Konoha's intelligence division. No council. No Danzo. The decision to exclude the council was visible in the way nobody mentioned the council, the deliberate absence of it in the room. Hiruzen laid out what he knew. The invasion plan, as far as it had been reconstructed, involved the exam as cover for infiltrating Sound and Sand shinobi into the village in the guise of participants and their entourages. A coordinated signal during the final exam, the public event, the largest crowd, maximum chaos, would initiate simultaneous action on multiple fronts. The Sand component was the largest military force. The Sound component was smaller but specifically trained for high-value disruption. The target was the Hokage. And through the chaos, Orochimaru's personal objective. Naruto listened to all of it and then said, Gaara is in the Sand force. Everyone looked at him. He's coming for the exams. He's enrolled as a Sand genin. He had known this. Gaara had written him, a short, careful letter in handwriting that looked like someone learning what handwriting was for. I am coming to the Leaf exams. My siblings will be with me. I want to see you. He doesn't know about the invasion. His father's dead and he doesn't know, and whoever is running the Sand operation is using him as a weapon without telling him. You can't know that for certain, one of the ANBU commanders said. I know Gaara, Naruto said. He wouldn't participate in something designed to kill people without knowing about it. Not now. He held the commander's eyes. He's not who he was 3 months ago. 1 conversation, 3 days of conversations, Naruto said. And 4 letters since. I know what his handwriting looks like when he's uncertain and what it looks like when he's decided something. The letter about the exams was decided. Someone going into a covert invasion operation doesn't write decided letters about wanting to see their friend. The room was quiet. He'll need to be warned, Naruto said. Separately from whatever the village does about the invasion. He needs to know what's happening before it starts so he can choose. That's a significant intelligence risk, Hiruzen said. I know. Naruto met the old man's eyes. I'm still saying he gets the choice. The look between them lasted several seconds. Then Hiruzen said, agreed. We handle it through you. Gaara arrived in Konoha on a Tuesday with his sister and brother, traveling with the sand exam delegation, and Naruto found him within 20 minutes of the delegation's entry through the gate. He didn't go through official channels. He went over the wall, a single fluid motion, up and over, landing on the other side in the road with the ease of something that had never really acknowledged walls as barriers, just convenient height differences, and fell into step beside Gaara in the street. Gaara's sand rose immediately. Dropped when it recognized him. You came over the wall, Gaara said. Gate takes longer. Naruto looked at him. The months had done something good to Gaara, not removed the damage, that didn't disappear in months, but layered something over it, the specific quality of a person who has been seen and is beginning to believe the seeing was real. He was still thin. Still carried the darkness under his eyes. Still had the sand moving in its constant low orbit. But his jaw was less tight and he walked differently, not the forced stillness of someone containing something explosive but the natural stillness of someone who had found, somewhere, a place to put down some of the weight. We need to talk, Naruto said. Away from the delegation. Gaara looked at him. Teal eyes reading the situation. Now. Now. He told him everything. The invasion plan, the Sand Force's role, the death of his father, what Orochimaru had done and why, the coordinated signal that would initiate everything. He told it straight, without softening the parts that were hard to hear, Gaara's father dead, Gaara's village being used, Gaara himself being positioned in the plan as an asset rather than a person. He watched it land. Gaara's face during this was very still, the stillness of something that has been hit and is deciding what to do with the impact. The sand moved through slow, heavy currents around him. His sister reached for his arm once and he let her, which 3 months ago he wouldn't have. When Naruto finished, Gaara was quiet for a long time. They didn't tell me, he said finally. I know. They used me. Not angry, exactly. Closer to something that was anger processed through the particular filter of a child who has been used before and recognized the pattern from the inside. Again. Yes. My father is dead. He said it like someone confirming a fact they already suspected. When? 3 weeks ago. Orochimaru took his identity. He's been operating as the Kazekage since. Gaara looked at the wall. I didn't know him, he said quietly. He was afraid of me. He tried to have me killed twice. A pause. I knew that. And I still, he stopped. Wanted him to stop being afraid of you, Naruto said. Yes. That's not weakness, Naruto said. That's just what you wanted. You're allowed to want it. The sand was very slow now, almost still. What do you need from me? Gaara said. I need you to not be where they expect you to be when the signal comes, Naruto said. I need your siblings safe. And I need Suna's force to lose its largest asset before the operation starts. He held Gaara's eyes. I'm not asking you to fight your own people. I'm asking you to refuse to be the weapon they made you. Gaara looked at him for a long time. And then what? If Suna's operation fails, if the Sand Force loses its advantage, there'll be a mess to clean up, Naruto said. But the village won't fall and people will be alive to clean it up. Including you. He paused. I'll be dealing with Orochimaru. By yourself? Jiraiya and Kakashi will be, I mean the wolf blood. The second threshold. Gaara's reading of situations had sharpened enormously in 3 months, fed by actual information and actual rest. You said the memories started. Orochimaru knows that. That's what he's coming for. Yes. Are you ready for it? Naruto looked at him. The honest answer to that question was, I don't know what ready means for this particular thing. The first wolf's memories came daily now, each one deeper, the second threshold not a wall but a slope, and he was somewhere on that slope without a good way to measure the gradient. I'll find out, he said. Gaara looked at him for another moment. Then, with the specific directness of someone who had recently learned what it felt like to have something to protect, come back from it. That's the plan, Naruto said. That's not a promise. Come back from it, Gaara said again. Naruto met his eyes. Yeah, he said. I'll come back. The Chunin exams ran for 3 days before the signal came. Naruto watched the exams from the arena stands with the wolf blood running its continuous low-register red of the crowd, mapping the false signatures, the sound shinobi who weren't what their papers said, the sand delegation operatives whose scent was wrong in the specific way that people's scent was wrong when they were waiting for something. He counted 14 in the arena alone. More in the village. Jiraiya was in the crowd too, positioned near the Hokage's box. Kakashi was somewhere in the structure's rafters, invisible and present. And Hiruzen was in the Hokage's box with the Kazekage, with Orochimaru as Kazekage, and the specific quality of the old man's stillness said he had known who was sitting next to him for longer than the intelligence report had known it, and was waiting, with the patience of someone who had been a Hokage for 30 years, for the right moment. The signal came on the third day, during the final match. It came as a genjutsu, a massive one, a sleep technique designed to drop the civilian population of the arena and give the hidden operatives their window. It washed over the stands in a wave and Naruto let it pass through him the way the binding seals had passed through him, the way everything chakra-based passed through the wolf blood's register, touching nothing, finding nothing to act on. Around him, 60% of the audience went to sleep. He stood up. In the Hokage's box, Orochimaru dropped the Kazekage disguise. The arena erupted. Naruto moved through it with the specific clarity of full wolf blood attention, human form, no transformation yet, but the blood fully present and forward, the sensory map of the entire arena immediate and total. He moved toward the sound operatives with a direction and speed that the chaos around him simply could not impede, because chaos was a condition that applied to things trying to navigate unpredictably, and the wolf blood's navigation was not navigating the chaos, it was reading it as terrain and moving through the cleanest lines. The first sound operative was neutralized before the man had finished raising his hands. Not violently, Naruto was precise in the way that things with exactly calibrated force were precise, the specific amount of impact required to remove a person from the operational equation without removing them from the living one, delivered with the unhurried accuracy of something that had never needed to use more force than the situation required because more than the situation required was simply wasteful. Second operative. Third. Fourth. He moved through the arena like water through a burning building, not meeting the fire, not engaging it on its own terms, simply occupying the space in a way that changed what the fire could do. Gaara was not in the arena. He had been where Naruto asked him to be, which was not where the sand operation needed him. The sand force's initial push fractured without its centerpiece, they'd built the tactical plan around Shikaku's release as an overwhelming force, and the overwhelming force was simply absent, and the plans that fractured without their centerpiece fractured badly and fast. Soon as shinobi, confused and leaderless and suddenly without their mission's premise, stopped advancing. It wasn't a surrender. It was a pause. But a pause was enough. The Hokage's box was a battlefield by the time Naruto reached it. Orochimaru had dropped all pretense of the disguise and was operating in his own form now, and even with the full context of what Naruto knew about him, the intelligence, the bridge conversations, the gold eyes and the scientific obsession, seeing him in motion was a different thing. He was genuinely extraordinary. The bodies moved around him with a fluid intelligence that made most shinobi combat look mechanical, and the power he brought to bear was specific and efficient in the way that only came from 60 years of absolute dedication to a single art. He was fighting Hiruzen. The old man was holding him. Barely. Jiraiya arrived at the same moment as Naruto from the opposite direction and the look that passed between them across the space of the box was brief and total. I take the defensive, you take the offensive, and Jiraiya moved to cover Hiruzen's flank with the kind of seamless coordination that came from people who had worked together long enough to think in the same problem space. Orochimaru saw Naruto. He stopped fighting, for exactly 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, his assessment was visible, not fear, never fear with this man, but something that was the opponent of fear, which was complete and total professional attention, the look of someone who has spent months building toward a moment and has the moment in front of them now and is reading its quality against his preparation. "You're past the first threshold," Orochimaru said. "Yes," Naruto said. "How far past?" "Far enough to make what you came for irrelevant," Naruto said. "Whatever mechanism you think you can reverse engineer from watching it, it doesn't work the way you think. I told you on the bridge. You told me the covenant wasn't portable," Orochimaru said. He was completely still, the fighting paused, Hiruzen and Jiraiya holding their positions in the background with the careful attention of people who understood they were watching something that had dimensions beyond the tactical. "You didn't tell me there was nothing to learn from observing the transition." "There isn't," Naruto said. "Not the thing you want." "Then let me verify that," Orochimaru said. And the gold eyes were entirely genuine, not manipulating, not performing, the actual scientist, the actual lifetime of obsession about the one thing he couldn't accept. "Let me see it. If you're right, I have my answer." "If I'm right, you're not right," Naruto said. "You're 8, you're afraid," Naruto said. The wolf blood read him with complete clarity, the old fear, the deep one, the foundation everything else was built on. "I told you on the bridge what's underneath everything you do. It's still there. You came here, used the invasion, got here, and you're still running from the same thing you've always been running from." He watched the gold eyes. "I can't give you what you want. Not because I won't, because it doesn't exist in the form you want it. The Covenant's answer to mortality isn't a mechanism. It's a relationship. The wolf blood extends my life because the pack needs its full expression to continue. You can't transplant a need." Orochimaru was very still. "You already knew that," Naruto said. "You knew it on the bridge. You know it now." Knowing something, Orochimaru said quietly, and accepting it are not the same process. "No," Naruto said. "They're not." The arena sounds were there, distant, the battle still ongoing in the structure below. The box held its quiet against the outside noise. "Then we fight," Orochimaru said. "Not with anger. With the specific resignation of a man who has run out of alternative routes and is choosing the one that remains." "If you want," Naruto said. "I need to know the scope of it," Orochimaru said. "The second threshold. I need to know what it means for what comes next. Not for the mortality question, for everything else. The things I've been watching build in you for a year." He held Naruto's eyes. "Show me." And that was the real ask. Not the bridge conversations ask, not the studied intellectual exchange, this was the older ask, the one underneath the science, the one that a man who had spent 60 years pursuing every extraordinary thing the world produced was making face to face with the most extraordinary thing he'd ever found. "Show me what you are." Naruto looked at him for a long moment. Then he turned inward. Found the frequency. Found the depth below the frequency. Found the place where the second threshold's memories lived, the accumulated weight of ancient time, and he opened the channel all the way. The transformation came. It was different from every previous transformation. Not faster or larger or more powerful in the measurable senses, it was different in quality, the difference between a river and an ocean, between a thing that moved in a direction and a thing that simply was. The wolf form assembled itself with the unhurried authority of something that had been doing this since before the world had a name for doing, and the silver eyes that opened at the end of it were not the silver of moonlight on water but something deeper, the silver of the thing that moon was reflecting, the cold, complete light of a star at incomprehensible distance. The memories were fully present. Every run under every moon. Every winter, every summer, every landscape the first wolf had moved through in the long time before the counting of years. Naruto was in all of it and all of it was in him, the complete inheritance of the covenant, and standing in the Hokage's box in October with the arena battle raging below and 3 humans watching with varying degrees of composed professionalism, he was simultaneously 8 years old in Konoha and everything the first wolf had ever been, neither one diminished, both completely real. He looked at Orochimaru. The gold eyes were completely still. Not the stillness of control. The stillness of something stopped. The scientist and the ambition and the 60 years of relentless pursuit all arrived at a full stop, looking at what was in front of them, and the face showed, just for a moment, just for the specific duration of authentic response before the composure closed back over it, what a person looked like when they saw something genuinely beyond their framework. He looked, Naruto thought, almost peaceful. There it is, Orochimaru said quietly. His voice was different. Something in it had let go. There's the thing I couldn't find. Yeah, Naruto said. It's not replicable. No. It was never replicable. The gold eyes closed briefly. The covenant doesn't produce a mechanism. It produces, he opened his eyes. A relationship, you said. I heard that on the bridge and I couldn't, he stopped. It's okay, Naruto said. Because it was, in the specific sense that honesty was okay even when what was honest was hard. Now you know. Orochimaru looked at him for another moment. Then he straightened. The scientist's composure came back, but it came back different from how it had been, lighter, missing the specific density that 60 years of a particular pursuit gave a person when that pursuit was still running. I'm leaving, Orochimaru said. The invasion has failed. The sand force is standing down. This, he looked at Naruto, the word visibly insufficient. This is over. Orochimaru, Hiruzen said. Orochimaru didn't turn. Not tonight, old man. A pause. I'm tired. He moved. Fast, clean, the specific exit of someone who knew exactly how to disappear, and he was gone, over the box's edge, into the structure, gone before the ANBU could have formed a response even if forming a response had been the right call, which Naruto, looking at Hiruzen, did not think was what Hiruzen was calculating. The old Hokage stood in his box with his hands at his sides and looked at the space where Orochimaru had been, and then at Naruto, and the expression on his face was not triumph. It was the complex, tired expression of a man who had been through too many nights like this and was still standing, which was its own kind of victory but not a comfortable one. Is it over? Jiraiya said. For tonight, Naruto said. He let the transformation go. The wolf form dissolved back into the 8-year-old in the oversized training clothes, the silver eyes going blue, the memories settling back into the deep layer where they lived, present, available, part of him, not gone. For tonight, Jiraiya repeated. Not satisfied with that. But accepting it. It's enough, Kakashi said, from somewhere above them, and then dropped down from the rafters and landed beside Naruto and stood there in his easy way, the book nowhere in evidence, just the man. They found Gaara on the roof of a building 1 street east of the arena. He was sitting with his back against a water tower with his siblings on either side of him and the sand moving in its slow orbit, and when Naruto came over the roof edge he looked up with the teal eyes and the particular expression that was as close as Gaara currently got to relief. You came back, he said. Told you, Naruto said. He sat down next to him on the roof. Below them the city was still sorting itself out, the sounds of aftermath, the shinobi voices coordinating the cleanup, the distant sounds of the small fires being put out. The arena stood, intact. The Hokage's box was intact. The village was intact. Temari, Gaara's sister, was looking at Naruto with the expression of someone who had heard about him secondhand and was revising the account upward. Kankuro was looking at the city below and eating something from a paper bag with the philosophical acceptance of a person who has had a long couple of days and decided food was the correct response. Your village, Gaara said. He was looking at Konoha spread out below them. It held. It does that, Naruto said. What happens now? Naruto thought about it. Suna needed a Kazekage. Konoha needed to sort out the aftermath and the question of what a failed invasion by an allied village meant for the alliance. Orochimaru was loose in the world with 60 years of knowledge and a mortality question that was answered but not resolved. Knowing something and accepting it weren't the same process, he'd said it himself. Danzo's situation was unresolved. The second threshold memories were fully open now and the slope of it was going to keep going and he didn't know what was at the bottom. And Gaara was 6 years old and sitting on a roof in the dark next to the water tower and his siblings, having lost his father and his village's direction in the same week, carrying the shikaku and the sand and his mother's love woven through both of them. Probably a mess, Naruto said. Probably complicated. Yes, Gaara said. Probably. That okay? Gaara looked at him. The teal eyes, the sand moving, the specific gravity of a person who has been lonely for a long time and is learning what it means to have something to stand next to. I've had worse, he said. Naruto laughed. Short and genuine and a little surprised by itself. Yeah, he said. So have I. They sat on the roof and the city moved below them and the moon was 3 days past full, waning now, and its light came down over Konoha like it came down over everything, indifferent, patient, the same light that had been coming down since before the world had eyes to see it with. In the deep layer of himself, the first wolf moved through its ancient landscape under that same moon, the one that had always been there, and the run was easy and the ground was solid and the night smelled of everything that had ever lived in it, which was everything. We are not finished, the first wolf said. No, Naruto agreed. Good, it said. Run. He sat on the roof in Konoha in October with his friend who smelled like sand and old grief and the specific warmth of someone beginning to learn that they were allowed to be warm, and the city sorted itself out below them, and the world was broken in several places and being put back together in several others. And he was 8 years old with the oldest blood in the world and the first wolf's memories in his chest and 3 people in the world who knew exactly what he was and chose to be near him anyway. The moon moved west. He was not finished. He had barely started.